Hey everyone, tonight we're heading into something colder, heavier, and significantly louder. A time when engines roared, shells screamed, and metal coffins rolled across frozen hellscapes. We're going to the Eastern Front during World War II, but not as a general, or a spy, or a heroic freedom fighter. No, you're in the belly of a tiger tank, and it's not the badass war movie fantasy you think it is. It's hot, it's cramped, it's loud, and it's a death sentence on treads. Before we get into it, take a moment to like the video and subscribe if you haven't already. Only if you actually enjoy falling asleep to this kind of bleak bedtime history. And drop a comment letting me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. Always curious to see who's trying to relax while we casually wander through humanity's worst ideas. Now, maybe turn down the lights, fluff up that pillow, and try to find a comfortable position, because things are about to get very uncomfortable. Your shift starts now. You're not a tank commander. You're not the hero. You're just another member of the crew. And your ride, this 54-ton steel monster with a name that sounds powerful, is about to become the loudest, hottest, most claustrophobic trap you've ever climbed into. You're on the Eastern Front. And spoiler alert, it doesn't care about your survival. Congratulations, you've just arrived on the Eastern Front. It's January. Not that the month really matters, because time has started to blur into one long, frozen panic attack. The year is 1943, or maybe 1944. It's hard to keep track when the calendar days are marked more by incoming artillery than by numbers. You're part of a panzer unit that's just been redeployed from the west. You thought the weather was bad in France. That mud was frustrating, sure. But this isn't frustrating. This is something else entirely. The cold doesn't just bite, it burrows. Your uniform, a wool coat that barely kept you warm back at training camp, is now a stiff, frozen crust. Your fingers? Numb. Toes? Probably already halfway to frostbite. And you haven't even left the staging area yet. You step out of the truck that dropped you off, one of the last functioning supply vehicles to make it through the chaos, and immediately regret it. The snow goes up to your knees. It's not fluffy snow. This stuff is crusted with grime, churned up by treads, boots, and blood. There's a smell here, even in the cold. The kind that shouldn't exist when it's below zero. But it does. A mix of diesel, unwashed bodies, and something you don't want to identify. And this is just the welcome mat. You don't see many buildings, mostly because they've all been shelled into flat, steaming piles. The ground itself is barely ground, just frozen mud trying to disguise itself as terrain. Trees are stripped, blackened, or broken like matchsticks. There's no wildlife, no birds chirping. Just wind, distant shellfire, and the occasional cough from a soldier who's already 3 layers into pneumonia. Your tiger tank sits in the middle of what used to be a village square. Or maybe it was just a crossroads. Hard to tell now. It's coated in frost and grime, the paint chipped and faded. That proud iron cross emblem looks less intimidating when it's barely visible through a crust of ice and soot. The engine's not running, hasn't run in hours, which means the crew inside is freezing slowly, surrounded by frozen steel that leaches the heat straight out of their bones. You meet them one by one. They don't smile. Nobody does out here. The commander is 30 but looks 50. Sunken eyes, red-rimmed from smoke and lack of sleep. He doesn't introduce himself. He just nods and motions for you to follow. The gunner is silent, always. You're told not to take it personally. He hasn't spoken since Kursk. Load as a kid, maybe 18. Somehow always chewing something. No one knows what. Probably frozen bread or the lining of his glove. The driver is the only one with a sense of humour, and even that's dried up since December. His last joke was about how you can't feel your toes if you don't have any. No one laughed. You're the new guy, which means your job is simple. Do what you're told, don't screw up, and try not to die. At least not in a way that makes the rest of them look bad. You climb inside the Tiger for the first time. The hatch creaks open like it's been welded shut by spite. The metal is so cold it burns. You lower yourself in carefully. No one warns you about the smell. It hits like a backhand. Diesel, sweat, old leather, gun oil, and feet. Always feet. The heat from the engine when it's on makes everything sweat and stink. But the cold seals it all in when the engine's off, which is often. There's no room to stand up, barely enough to sit comfortably. The turret is like a metal womb that resents your presence. Every surface is hard, every edge a threat. You bump your head within the first 10 seconds. Everyone does. There's no apology, just a look that says, get used to it. You look around. It's impressive in a way. The engineering, the sheer mass of this thing. The gun alone is longer than a bus. The armour could stop almost anything. At least that's what the propaganda posters said. But nobody here trusts the posters. The posters didn't tell them about the breakdowns, or the fuel shortages, or what happens when a Soviet infantryman with a Molotov cocktail gets within sprinting distance. Someone hands you a canteen. It's mostly frozen. You chip at the ice with your fingernail until you can sip the sludge at the bottom. It tastes like rust and regret. You're told to conserve it. Water has to be melted from snow, and firewood is a luxury item now. The last guy who tried to take some from a nearby forest never came back. Mines, or patrols, or wolves. Take your pick. Then comes the briefing. The commander speaks quietly. Not because he's trying to be sneaky, but because loud voices feel wrong out here. Everything is hushed, like the snow itself is listening. You're heading east. Surprise! The Soviets are regrouping, and someone in Berlin thinks now's the perfect time for a counterattack. You don't ask questions. The last guy who asked a question got reassigned to infantry, and then reassigned to the ground, permanently. You spend the rest of the day prepping. The gun needs cleaning, which involves sticking your already frozen hands into a giant steel barrel. The shells are stacked like metal coffins in the hull. You help load them. Each one weighs more than the kid chewing his glove. You're not wearing gloves, by the way. Lost them back at the depot. They didn't have extras. So now it's just your raw hands against freezing brass and sharp steel. You bleed a little. No one notices. Everyone's hands look like they have been through a blender. Night falls fast. There's no sunset. Just a slow fade into darkness. And then everything's black. You think you'll sleep, but you won't. Not really. The tank doesn't shut down. Not completely. The engine's fired up periodically to keep the oil from solidifying. That means noise. The low growl of machinery and the constant hiss of breath from 4 other guys who all snore, cough, or mutter in their sleep. You lie there on a bench that isn't a bench, next to ammo that could turn you into a red mist if the tank takes a bad hit. You can't stretch your legs, you can't roll over, and you definitely can't escape the stench. It's worse when someone farts, which happens often. High-fat diets, stress, and canned meat. You do the math. You fall asleep for maybe 20 minutes at a time. You wake up every time someone moves, or when the wind shakes the hull, or when a shell goes off somewhere nearby, and you instinctively wonder if it's the one that's finally going to find you. By morning, your joints ache like you've aged 20 years. Your socks are damp. Always. You didn't sweat. It's just the air. The condensation. Your breath. It gathers and soaks everything. The boots are stiff from frost, and the laces snap when you try to tie them. You make do. Everyone does. The only alternative is being that guy, the one who can't pull his weight, and nobody has time for that out here. You eat something. Hard biscuits that crack your teeth, a slice of grey sausage, cold coffee if you're lucky. The conversation is minimal. Nobody wants to talk before a mission. It's not superstition. It's preservation. The less you say, the less someone has to remember you by if things go wrong. The radio crackles. Orders. Coordinates. Time to move. The driver mutters something under his breath, hits the ignition, and the tiger shudders awake like an angry god with a hangover. The whole hull vibrates. Everything inside rattles. You feel it in your bones. You check the gun. You brace your feet. You try not to think about the Soviet lines you'll be facing in a few hours, the anti-tank guns, the mines. The fact that your armour, thick as it is, doesn't mean a thing if you throw a track or take a hit from above. You try not to think at all, because thinking in a Tiger tank on the Eastern Front is just another way of dying early. The first time you see the Tiger, you don't think weapon, you think obstacle. It doesn't look like it's meant to move. It looks like a bunker someone forgot to bury. 68 tons of steel parked in the middle of a half-frozen field, radiating menace and exhaustion in equal measure. The paint is chipped, the treads are crusted with old mud and worse, and the smell hits before you even reach it. Diesel, hot metal, and the kind of body odour you can only earn by sleeping inside a sealed box with 4 other men and no working ventilation. You've been told this tank is the best, a masterpiece of German engineering, a fortress on treads. It's not invincible, of course, but the way people talk about it, you'd think it was. On paper, it has the stats to back that up. Armour thick enough to shrug off most Soviet shells. An 80mm gun that can punch through anything the Red Army throws at it. Range, firepower, intimidation factor. But standing next to it, none of that matters. What matters is that this thing is massive, loud, and built like someone tried to solve fear with mass production. Climbing in is the first mistake. You don't step into a Tiger. You wedge. The hatch opens just wide enough for you to twist and lower yourself down like you're entering a steel coffin backwards. There's no ladder, no comfortable way to do it. And once you're inside, you realise something very quickly. This wasn't designed for comfort, or space, or humans. Everything is metal, cold in the morning, hot in the afternoon, never soft. You can't stretch your legs. You can't lean back. You can barely turn your head without bumping into a bulkhead, a gear lever, or another person. Every surface has corners. Every corner is waiting to hit you in the ribs, the knee, or the back of the skull. If the engine doesn't kill you, the ergonomics will. The seating arrangements are more of a compromise than a design. The commander gets the best spot. If you can call crouching in a dome with your legs twisted sideways best, everyone else makes do. You, as the new guy, get the least desirable position, which changes based on who's in the worst mood that day. There's a spot near the floor where the fumes gather, and the vibration shakes your spine like a dentist's drill. That might be yours. The main gun dominates everything. It takes up more space than anything else in the turret and demands constant attention. Loading it is a two-hand job, sometimes a two-man job, and always a risk to your knuckles. The shells weigh nearly 20 kilograms each, and they're stacked wherever they fit. On the floor, behind the seats, sometimes practically in your lap. There's no padding. If the tank hits a bump or breaks suddenly, those shells shift. And you don't want to be in their way when they do. The radio is mounted next to the commander's seat. It crackles and hisses constantly, even when it's not transmitting anything useful. You'll hear bursts of static, bits of half-translated commands, and long periods of nothing while the other crews argue over channels or go dark completely. Communication is theoretically crucial, but often just a background hum of stress. Storage doesn't really exist. You bring what you can carry, and then you find places to wedge it. A bag of mouldy bread sits wedged behind the gunner's seat. A few tins of meat tucked under the floor plate. Ammunition everywhere else. Personal items, they're not even a consideration. If you have a photo of home, it's probably smudged with oil and folded into your coat pocket. No one has space for sentiment. You don't talk much once you're inside, not just because it's loud, though it is constantly, but because every conversation has the potential to turn into an argument. The stress is already high, tempers are short, and there's nowhere to go, no door to slam, no corner to walk off to. You're trapped with 4 other men in a steel box. And if you don't figure out how to coexist, it's going to get ugly fast. Then the engine starts. That's when the real noise begins. It's not a hum. It's not a growl. It's a roar. A shattering, vibrating, teeth-rattling eruption that makes your bones buzz and your sinuses hurt. You can feel the sound more than hear it. It runs through your chest, up your spine, and makes your vision blur if you're sitting the wrong way. You try to shout something to the loader, but he doesn't respond. He didn't hear you. Nobody hears anything. You get used to repeating yourself. The vibration never stops. It runs through the frame, through the bench, through your feet, and eventually through your thoughts. You stop noticing it after a while. Then you start noticing the headaches, the constant low throb at the base of your skull. You can't tell if it's from the noise, the fumes, the tension, or all of it. Probably all of it. Temperature control doesn't exist. If the engine's running, the interior cooks. If it's off, the cold settles in like a second crew. In the summer, it's an oven. In the winter, a freezer. Either way, your body pays for it. Yeah, you sweat into your uniform, which never dries. Or you shiver so hard, your teeth feel loose. Layers help, but not much. The cold finds a way in. The heat finds a way to stay. There are no windows, just periscopes and viewports. Narrow, distorted, often fogged over. You don't see the battlefield. You see a slit of it, and only when you remember to look. The world outside becomes an abstract concept, filtered through glass and fear. You rely on what the commander tells you, or what the driver screams when something explodes too close. Mostly, you just stare ahead and wait for orders. Maintenance happens constantly, whether the tank is moving or not. Tracks need checking, gears need greasing, the gun needs cleaning, filters need replacing. Nothing is automated. Everything is done by hand, often while crouching in impossible positions, with fingers too numb to grip and tools too basic to help. You get cut, you get burned, you curse, you grunt, and you wipe your hands on whatever surface is least filthy. Even when nothing is actively broken, something's always slightly off. A clunk from the rear axle. A warning light that flickers. A rattling sound near the engine block that no one wants to talk about. You learn to ignore half the problems because if you didn't, you'd never move at all. You eat where you sit. Usually cold food, when there is food, canned meat, stale biscuits, occasionally a boiled potato if someone traded for it or stole it. There's nowhere to wash your hands, so whatever's on your fingers ends up in your mouth. Hygiene is not a priority. Clean water is rare, and soap is something people laugh about. You relieve yourself when you can, which often means waiting far too long or using a makeshift solution involving a tin can and a lot of denial. If you're moving, you hold it. If you're stopped, you find a spot behind the tank and pray no one's watching through a scope. Modesty doesn't survive long in these conditions. Sleep happens in pieces. 10 minutes here, half an hour there. Usually while sitting upright, helmet still on, one eye half open in case someone calls your name, or the shelling starts again. You don't dream. If you do, you don't remember. The inside of a tiger tank isn't built for dreaming. You don't get used to it. People say that. You'll get used to it. You won't. You'll learn to function, you'll adapt, but you'll never be comfortable. Never relaxed. Always tense. Always scanning the dials, the corners, the shadows outside. Always wondering when the next shell will hit, or if you'll hear it at all. So yes, the tiger tank is deadly. It's powerful. It can take out an enemy from over a kilometre away with terrifying precision. But inside, it's not glorious. It's not heroic. It's not even remotely comfortable. It's 5 men packed into a moving furnace, surrounded by explosives, breathing poison, and hoping they don't stall in the wrong place. That's your home now. You've officially been assigned to the crew. No ceremony, no speech. Just a short grunt from the commander and a nod toward your station, like you're a replacement part that might break just as fast as the last one. That's your welcome to the inside of a tiger tank, functional, indifferent, and slightly hostile. There's no training montage, no dramatic briefing. You're expected to figure it out on the job, and preferably without slowing anyone down. Everyone assumes you already know what you're doing. They don't have time for explanations. The last guy didn't either, and they're still scraping his boots out of the turret wall. The first thing you learn is how not to stand. There are exactly 3 acceptable body positions inside the Tiger: crouched, curled, or crammed. Every movement is a negotiation with the space. You turn your shoulders, you bang into a gear lever. You sit back, you hit your head on the turret ring. You drop anything at all, and suddenly you're part of a very awkward group exercise to retrieve it before it jams something important. Everyone is always in everyone else's way. If the commander wants to look through the periscope, the gunner has to duck. If the loader shifts to grab a shell, the driver has to move his elbow or take it to the ribs. There's a choreography to it, but it's not graceful. It's more like 5 men performing a dance no one wants to learn, and everyone's too tired to care about doing right. You don't have personal space. The idea doesn't even exist here. You sleep beside boots, you eat beside the gun breech. If someone sneezes, you wear it. You feel every breath, every twitch, every nervous cough. There's no stepping outside for air, no taking a walk to clear your head. The only walk you'll take is the one back to headquarters if the tank catches fire, and you're lucky enough to get out. And if you think fresh air is an option when the hatch is open, think again. You're just inviting snow, smoke, or shrapnel inside. That hatch stays closed most of the time. The air is stale, heavy with diesel and powder residue. You get used to the smell, but your lungs don't. After a few hours, your throat burns and your sinuses sting. After a few days, you stop noticing altogether, which probably isn't a good thing. Then there's the heat, not the good kind. The kind that builds slowly, clinging to every surface and making your uniform feel like wet carpet. When the engine runs too long, the temperature inside spikes. There's no fan, no air circulation. Just 5 men sweating through wool and leather, trying not to pass out before the next order comes through. During winter, the opposite problem. Metal radiates cold like a punishment. Your fingers barely work, your boots stiffen with frost, and the condensation from your breath turns to rime on the inside walls. You learn to sit without touching anything. It doesn't help much. Every metal surface is either too hot or too cold. Sometimes both somehow, and you're stuck between them. Your hands are never clean. Grease, soot, dried blood from a knuckle you split trying to fit a shell into a too small space. You wipe them on your trousers until the fabric goes stiff. No one says anything. Everyone's pants look like that. When the tank is moving, the ride isn't smooth. It's not even close. You lurch, sway, rattle, and bounce. Your spine gets a new alignment every time the driver hits a rut. You hang on to whatever you can reach. Gun rails, seat edges, sometimes each other. Doesn't matter. Something always slips. Usually your stomach. The noise is constant. Engine rumble, track clatter, gear whine. Everything's amplified inside the tank. You feel it in your teeth. Your eardrums pulse in time with the movement. Someone speaks, and you just nod because you didn't hear a word. You pretend you understood, because asking for a repeat makes you look slow. No one wants to be the slow guy in a tank crew. That's how you get reassigned, or left behind. You get tasks. Load this, unjam that. Hold a part while someone else hits it with a wrench and a curse. Nothing works on the first try. You learn where to hit things, when to smack the turret controls, how to brace your legs so the recoil doesn't throw you into the shell rack. These aren't lessons someone teaches. You learn because doing it wrong once usually hurts. Eating isn't scheduled, it's opportunistic. A moment of silence, of shovel in a spoonful of something unrecognisable and hope it's not too expired. Some crews have small stoves. Yours doesn't. You eat cold or not at all. Food tastes like metal and boredom. The best you can hope for is something that doesn't make you sick. Water is worse. You ration it. Everyone does. You sip from the canteen like it's holy. Some melt snow on the exhaust. Others just chew ice if they're desperate. You'll get headaches. You'll get cramps. It doesn't matter. You hydrate when you can, not when you need to. You get to know the other men in ways you didn't want. Their habits, their tics. Who hums under stress. Who curses every time the tank turns left. Who stares at nothing when things get quiet. You don't talk about feelings. You just listen to them bounce off the steel in the silence. You start to develop a twitch, maybe more than one. A flinch when the turret rotates. A blink when the radio crackles. These are not quirks. These are adaptations. Your brain is trying to keep up with the constant sensory assault. Every time something explodes nearby, your pulse spikes and your jaw locks. And you don't even realise it until hours later when you can't unclench your teeth. When you're parked for the night, Nobody sleeps properly. You lean against something hard and try to trick your brain into drifting off, but the vibrations still echo in your body, even when the engine's off. Your ears ring, your muscles twitch. Someone shifts in their sleep and bumps into you, and it feels like a threat. Not because they mean anything by it, but because space is so tight that anything touching you is a reminder that you can't leave. That's the worst part. You can't leave. Not just the tank, the job, the reality. You're inside a mobile machine of death that doubles as your bedroom, dining room, and panic chamber. It doesn't feel like armour. It feels like a trap. And even though it's technically protecting you, it also makes you a very specific kind of target. One that the Soviets are happy to hit with everything they have. There's no rank in here. Not really. Outside, yes. Officers, NCOs, protocols. Inside, it's survival. If the loader knows the gun better than the commander, people listen to the loader. If the driver says the engine's about to blow, you believe him. You don't argue because arguing takes time, and time is a luxury you don't get when you're sitting on enough ammunition to vaporize everyone inside. No one's brave in a tank. Not really. There's just fear at different volumes. Some get quiet, others get angry. A few make jokes. You laugh, not because they're funny, but because it's either that or start screaming. And no one wants to be the one who breaks first. Eventually, you get used to the routines. What passes for normal in here. You know when to brace, when to duck, when to reach for the next shell. You know the difference between a direct hit and a near miss just by the way the walls shake. You can reload with your eyes closed, and sometimes you have to. But no matter how good you get, how sharp your reflexes are, how well the crew works together, there's always something you can't control. An ambush, a mine, a jammed track, a shell you didn't see coming. 1 second, you're loading a round. The next, you're upside down, the air filled with smoke, someone screaming, someone not moving, no warning, no drama, just noise and heat, and then the kind of silence that doesn't feel real. You'll make it through some days. Others you won't. The tank will break down. You'll run out of fuel. You'll take a hit. You'll fight to escape through a hatch that was easy to open yesterday but won't budge now. The crew will scatter. Some won't get far. Some won't get out at all. And the ones who do, they'll climb into another Tiger tomorrow and start the process all over again. Because the Eastern Front doesn't care how tired you are. It doesn't care how long you've gone without sleep. It doesn't care that you haven't felt dry socks in a month, or that your back feels like someone beat it with a crowbar. You're a tank crewman now. Get in, shut the hatch, and hope this time you make it back. There's no graceful way to enter a Tiger tank. Nobody slides in. Nobody hops down like a movie hero. You don't leap from the ground and land in position, ready to fight. You climb. Awkwardly. Slowly. Usually while carrying something heavy, covered in mud, and trying not to bash your face on a sharp corner. First, you get your boots up on the track, which is always slippery because it's either caked with frozen grime or slick from oil. Then you hoist yourself up onto the engine deck. The surface is uneven, metal grates and tool mounts and loose bolts, and if you're not careful, you roll an ankle before you even reach the hatch. That hatch, your entrance to the belly of the beast, isn't wide. It looks small from the outside. It feels even smaller when you're trying to squeeze through it with gear, wearing a coat that's 2 sizes too thick, and you're holding your breath to keep from snagging on something. There's usually a ring of frost around the edge. Sometimes blood. You don't ask whose. Inside the turret, the space is unforgiving. You don't drop in. You lower yourself like you're descending into a steel trash compactor. There's a moment where you hang, one arm inside, one foot searching for the floor, and you realise there's no graceful way to finish this movement, so you just let go and thud into place. Hopefully not onto someone else's leg. Everyone's already in position by the time you get down. The commander has his head half out the cupola. The driver's already fiddling with the transmission. The loader's elbow deep in a box of shells. No one says hello. You nod, duck your head to avoid the turret ring, and shimmy into whatever corner you're supposed to inhabit. There's no light switch. There's barely light at all. What visibility you have comes from whatever cracks open to the outside. On cloudy days, that means nothing. So you work in the dark. You memorise locations by feel. You learn that the third bolt from the left is where your foot should rest, and the second ridge under the panel is where you stash your gloves. If you're lucky enough to have gloves. The air is stale. It always is. Even with the hatch open, the tank has a smell. It's part oil, part canvas, part human. It's sweat that's soaked into everything and never dried. It's leather that hasn't been clean since it left the factory, and gun oil that never quite stops dripping. After the first week, you can identify each member of the crew by scent. You wish you couldn't. Once you're in, you're in. You don't pop out for a walk. You don't get breaks. That hatch is the one exit, and nobody opens it unless they have to. If you're in hostile territory, which is almost always, the hatch stays sealed for hours, sometimes days, and once it's closed, the tank becomes its own little world, one that doesn't care if you're comfortable. The steel walls radiate cold, like they're trying to punish you for existing. In winter, the temperature inside the hold drops so fast your breath crystallizes. You can see it. You can feel it when it hits the walls and drips down, freezing into tiny stalactites on the edges of the turret. Everyone shivers. No one says anything. It's not worth the energy. In summer, the opposite. The walls soak up sunlight like a pan, and soon it's 50 degrees inside and rising. The metal becomes too hot to touch. The floor burns through your boots. The ammo cooks. You sweat until there's nothing left to sweat. Then you keep sweating anyway. There's no airflow, no relief. The hatch stays shut. You're sealed in with your own steam. There's no ladder inside, just makeshift footholds and corners you learn to grab out of necessity. Every inch of movement is calculated. Every time you shift positions, you risk smashing your knee on a box or jamming your fingers between a bolt and a recoil shield. You learn to move in half steps and muscle memory. And when the tank is bouncing over rough terrain, that means constant bracing. One hand here, one foot wedged there, head tilted just so. Otherwise you get thrown into something solid. Usually the gun breech. Sometimes another crew member. There are no seat belts, no cushions. Just thin pads duct taped to steel slabs. If they fall off, you pick them up. If they rip, you use them anyway. After a while, sitting on bare metal doesn't seem that bad. At least it's not wet, hopefully. You eat in the same space you sleep, work, and panic in. Rations come out of your bag or someone else's, depending on who still has theirs. You eat cold, you eat fast, you eat quietly. There's no dining area. You chew over the breech of the main gun, using it as a makeshift table. Someone inevitably spills something. It mixes with the rest of the grime on the floor. No one wipes it up. The crew rotates in shifts. but sleep is catch as catch can. There's no schedule. If there's a lull, you grab it. Someone leans back and closes their eyes for 10 minutes while someone else keeps watch. You try to sleep upright, but the engine hum, the vibration, and the constant awareness that you're surrounded by explosives make it difficult. The dream, if you can even call it that, is to get 45 minutes uninterrupted. The reality is usually less. And the noise. The hatch doesn't keep it out. Artillery, machine guns, the engine, the tracks, the groaning suspension, all of it bleeds in. The walls don't muffle sound. They magnify it. Explosions become something you feel in your jaw. Even when the battle is far off, the rumble crawls under your skin. Inside the tank, silence doesn't exist. Communication is simple. Yelling over the engine, slapping shoulders, pointing. The intercom system, when it works, is barely clearer than a broken radio. Most of the time, you don't need words. Everyone just knows what to do, or they pretend well enough to avoid embarrassment. If you have to ask what's going on, you're already behind. Opening the hatch again is rare, dangerous. It's also awkward. It jams. It freezes shut. The locking pin sticks. You end up beating on it with a tool until it finally gives, and then it flies open like it's angry at you. Outside, it's either freezing wind or smoke-filled heat. There's no good version. You poke your head out, feel exposed, vulnerable, and then duck back down as fast as you can. Up top is sniper country. Mortar bait, open-air regret, so you stay inside. Not because you want to, because you have to. Because the alternative is worse. Outside means walking. Outside means being seen. Outside means being a silhouette for someone else's iron sight. Inside is hell. Outside is shorter hell. You start to understand why the hatch matters. Once it closes, you're not just sealed in physically, you're shut off. From clean air, from space, from movement, from the idea that you could just stand up and walk away. It becomes a boundary between what's tolerable and what's survivable. Once it's down and locked, your world shrinks to steel walls and diesel breath. And the crazy thing? After enough time, you start feeling safer with it closed. Not because anything's improved, but because open space becomes unsettling. Too bright, too loud, too exposed. Inside a tank, everything's wrong, but at least it's familiar. At least you know what might kill you. Out there, anything goes. You get back inside, and the crew moves around you like clockwork. Irritated, tired clockwork, but clockwork nonetheless. You lower yourself down, twist into place, exhale. The hatch slams shut above your head. There's a clang, a lurch, and the tiger starts moving. You're sealed in again, and whatever part of your brain still remembers fresh air, standing room, or personal space, it goes quiet. You're in now. The hatch is shut. The light's gone. The engine's humming low, like it's still deciding whether it wants to cooperate today. The rest of the crew settles in without a word. No one asks if you're ready. There's no checklist. Just the dull scrape of a boot against metal, the thud of a hand tapping a lever, and the faint metallic click of someone adjusting the safety on a sidearm they hope they never have to use in here. This is the part they never talk about in the training manuals. The part after you're inside but before the tank actually does anything, when it's just you and 4 other men sharing air that was stale an hour ago, and only getting worse. The interior of the Tiger tank is not a workspace. It's not a command centre. It's a sealed, groaning compartment designed to move and kill things while slowly grinding its crew into sleep-deprived, nicotine-stained wrecks. Every surface is unforgiving. You can't lean back without hitting something. You can't stand up without catching your head on a bracket or the lip of a hatch. You can't relax. There's no angle, no position that counts as comfortable. You start noticing the smell right away. It's not one thing. It's everything. Gun oil, fuel, sweat, crumbs of food that dropped into seams and have been fermenting quietly for days. The wool of your uniform never really dries, so it always smells damp. And the others? They've been living in this for months. Not sleeping in it. Living. Eating. Fighting. Waiting. The tank isn't just their vehicle. It's their home. And it smells exactly like 5 men who haven't had a proper bath since the last time they saw a functioning building. There's a sourness to the air. Not strong enough to knock you back, but it clings to everything. You breathe it in, and it sits in your throat. Your mouth tastes like carbon and grease. Your tongue feels like it's coated in dust. The heat is off because you're not moving yet, so the air stays still. Heavy. Trapped. If someone lights a cigarette, it's not smoke you smell. It's the burning reminder that your lungs don't have options anymore. Condensation gathers everywhere. On your helmet. On the inside of the viewports. On the walls. It drips slowly, forming grimy little trails down the riveted metal. Your back starts to feel damp. Then your shoulders. You shift, thinking you leaned against something wet, but no, it's just the tank. It sweats when it gets cold. Just like you. Your fingers start to tingle. Not from cold this time, but from stillness. There's nowhere to put your arms. You cross them, uncross them, rest them on your knees, shift them to the side. Every movement nudges someone else, or bumps something sharp. Eventually you give up and just press your hands flat against your thighs and sit still. Everything echoes. Someone clears their throat and it rings off the hole like a cough in a cathedral. The commander whispers something into the radio. The static buzzes and dies. No reply. The loader taps a shell with his knuckle. It makes a hollow, metallic note that sounds like it could echo forever. You try not to think about how many of those shells are packed into the corners of this machine. You try not to imagine what would happen if one went off in here. You try not to think about anything, but your brain keeps doing it anyway. There's always background noise, the idling engine, the slight creak of metal under tension. Your own breathing, louder than it should be. You hear the driver shift his weight. Someone adjusts a belt. The loader mutters under his breath in a language that's half German, half gibberish. No one speaks unless they have to. It's not tension. It's economy. Every word is energy spent, and everyone's trying to conserve whatever scraps of energy they have left. The walls close in fast. Not literally, they're not moving, but your mind starts to register the limits. You reach out and touch the ceiling, just a few inches above your head. The wall to your left is closer than you realised. The cannon breech to your right has no padding. The floor is so cramped that moving your legs makes the guy across from you adjust his without thinking. You're surrounded, not by enemies, but by metal and proximity. No windows, just slits. Narrow periscopes that show slices of outside if you're lucky. Sometimes they fog over. Sometimes they ice. Most of the time, they show nothing useful. A blur of trees. A distant haze. You can't see the sky. You can't see the horizon. The world becomes a moving blur outside a metal slit. You have no context, no orientation, no sense of where you are beyond coordinates scribbled on a map you haven't seen. Then the engine revs. Louder this time. The whole tank shifts forward a few inches. Someone swears. The driver's foot slips. Then another rev. This one's steadier. You brace your foot against the floor, lean back into the curved wall, and hold your breath. It starts moving. Everything vibrates, not violently, just constantly. You feel it in your teeth. Your boots rattle against the floor. The panel under your arm buzzes just enough to make your skin itch. It's like being inside a thunderstorm that never stops. You can't hear the outside world anymore. Just the drone of the engine, the grind of the treads, and the occasional bang as the suspension reacts to the terrain. That's when the inside really starts to change. The walls go from silent to musical, in a miserable way. Screws rattle. Loose gear jostles in its compartments. Spent casings clink. The shells knock in their racks. Someone forgot to tie down a tool bag, and it slides across the floor with every turn. The whole space becomes a percussion section for a nightmare orchestra, and above it all, the steady, pulsing roar of an engine that doesn't care about your ears. Your skin starts to feel greasy. It's not the oil. It's just existing in here. The sweat, the recycled breath, the damp wall. You itch, but there's no room to scratch properly. You shift your back against the wall, trying to find an edge to rub against like a bear on a tree, but it doesn't help. It never helps. Nobody complains. Not out loud. Everyone just adjusts. One man rubs his temple. Another flicks at a smudge on his boot that won't come off. The loader rocks gently, not for comfort, but because the movement distracts from the headache he's had since yesterday. No one says how they feel. They just survive in their own ways. There's no clock. Time is a theory inside a tank. You measure it by changes in engine tone, by the number of shells fired, by how long it's been since someone opened the hatch and let in the scent of outside air, even if just for a second. It could be morning, could be dusk, could be 3 hours since you started moving, could be 8. You don't know anymore. Your body stops bothering to ask for things. Food, water, sleep. It just adapts, slows down, waits. You feel a headache start to build behind your eyes, but there's nowhere to lie down, nowhere dark, nowhere quiet. So you press your palm against your forehead and ride it out. Eventually it fades into background noise, like everything else. Inside the tank, there's no rest, only degrees of discomfort. You learn to function at 40%. You celebrate when you reach 60. At 80, you're hallucinating from fumes or dehydration. And still the gun needs loading, the viewports need watching, the shells need hauling. You're part of a machine now. You just happen to have a pulse. Eventually you realise the tank isn't protecting you. It's holding you, trapping you, like an iron lung for soldiers, keeping you alive just long enough to bring you closer to something worse. You stop thinking of it as armour. It's not. It's just where you wait to get hit. No one says that part out loud, but you all know. You'd think, considering you're riding inside one of the most expensive tanks Germany ever produced, they'd at least give you gear that fits, or gear that works, or gear that doesn't immediately try to kill you by being the wrong thing at the wrong time. But no, what you get is standard issue, which is just another way of saying cheap, uncomfortable, and definitely not built for Russian winter. Your uniform is wool. Not the nice kind. Not the warm, soft, grandma knit this kind. This is industrial grade, scratchy, ill-fitted wool that clings to you in all the wrong places and leaves gaps in all the important ones. The trousers sag. The jacket rides up. The sleeves are too short or too long, or manage to be both depending on how cold it is and how tightly you're trying to hold a shell. Wool's supposed to be warm, right? That's what they tell you. But in practice, it doesn't insulate. It traps moisture. You sweat under it, because you will sweat, even in winter. And then the fabric absorbs it, soaks it up like a sponge, and holds it against your skin like a wet rag. Then the temperature drops, and that sweat turns to ice. Not metaphorical ice. Actual ice. You can feel the crystals forming in the folds under your arms, behind your knees, along your back. And then you stop sweating. Not because you've cooled down, but because your body's too tired to bother anymore. Underneath that wool, if you're lucky, you've got one layer, maybe two. A cotton undershirt that hasn't been clean in weeks, and a pair of thermal undertrousers that ride up the second you try to crouch. There's no elastic, no tailoring, just strings and buttons that always seem to come undone at the worst possible moment. One wrong move and half your lower layer is twisted around your thigh like a tourniquet. Socks? If you've still got two matching ones, you're already ahead of the game. Most guys are wearing one thick sock and one improvised rag bundle. The socks themselves are coarse, threadbare, and permanently damp. Your boots are supposed to be leather. They were once. Now they're cracked, stiff, and probably 2 sizes too big or small. You stuff newspaper inside to fill the gaps, when you can find newspaper. Sometimes you just stuff more socks in and hope for the best. There's no padding. That's worth repeating. No padding. Not on the uniform, not in the boots, not inside the tank. You're moving, working, and crashing around in a steel cage with zero protection between your joints and cold metal. Your knees bruise, your elbows swell. Your spine compresses 1 millimeter at a time. You build calluses in places that shouldn't have calluses. Your body adapts by hurting constantly, and eventually just tuning out certain pain signals to save energy. The gloves you are issued don't help. They're thin leather, not insulated, and they stiffen in the cold. They get slick with oil. They tear. They burn if you touch the wrong surface too soon after firing. Eventually you take them off because bare hands work better, even if it means the tips of your fingers go numb after 15 minutes. You try to warm them under your armpits, but your armpits are just as cold. Nothing warms anything in here. You have a scarf. It smells like everyone else's breath. You wrap it around your face until it's soaked with condensation and starts to crust over. Your helmet never fits properly. The chin strap's either too tight or flapping uselessly, and it doesn't cushion anything. It's metal, meant to deflect debris. It won't save you from a direct hit, or even a rough fall inside the tank. You hit your head anyway, often. When you go outside, if you go outside, it's worse. The boots fill with snow. Your knees lock from the cold. The scarf turns rigid. Your jacket crackles with frost. Your breath hangs in the air like smoke. You keep your hands in your pockets until you have to use them, and then you try not to cry when the wind hits your bare skin. Tears would freeze anyway. Plus, you don't want the others to see. Inside the tank, all that same gear becomes a heat trap. The wool soaks up body heat and turns it into sweat. You stink. Everyone does. No one says anything because it's not worth mentioning. You peel the jacket open halfway just to stop from passing out, but then you freeze the minute the tank slows down. There's no middle ground. You're always too hot or too cold. Usually both. You try to air things out during stops, lifting the collar, unbuttoning the jacket, maybe pulling off a sock and wringing it out if you have a few seconds. But there's no time. There's never time. and by the time you get another chance, the damage is done. Blisters, rashes, cold burns, sores that don't heal because you're always sitting, moving, sweating, freezing. Medical attention means a strip of cloth, maybe some iodine if you're lucky. Otherwise, you just live with it. You learn to adjust. That means finding weird workarounds, tying sleeves tighter with bootlaces, wearing the same sock on your right foot for 3 days because it rubs less, cutting holes in your gloves for dexterity and regretting it immediately. Everyone has their tricks. None of them solve anything. They just delay the discomfort a little longer. There's no waterproof layer. So if it rains, you're soaked. If it snows, the snow melts and you're soaked. If you sit in the same spot too long, condensation from your own body turns into moisture. And, again, you're soaked. You don't even try to stay dry. You just try to stay functional. Some guys wrap themselves in extra shirts, towels, anything they can find. The tank's storage space isn't meant for that, but it doesn't matter. You wedge your spare clothes wherever you can, hope they don't get crushed, and rotate them when you remember. Most of the time you just live in one uniform until it can practically stand up on its own. You smell like wet wool and defeat. No one compliments anyone's appearance. Everyone looks the same, greyish, rumpled, tired, and slightly burned. You might see yourself in a mirror once every few weeks, and when you do, you barely recognise the face. The grime makes your features look older. Your eyes sink. Your skin turns patchy and pale from the cold. Your lips crack. You bite them to stop the bleeding and just keep moving. There's a myth about the German army being well equipped. Maybe it was true once, in 1939, maybe. On parade grounds, sure, but not here. Not in a tiger tank, rolling across the endless frozen meat grinder of the Eastern Front. Out here, your gear barely keeps you alive. It doesn't help. It doesn't protect. It just delays the inevitable. So you put it on every morning. The same uniform, the same boots, the same gloves. You stretch your fingers until the joints stop hurting. You wipe down your coat, not to clean it, but to keep the grime from stiffening into armour. You adjust your belt. You adjust your expectations. Because no matter how much you gear up, you're still vulnerable. You're still cold. You're still sore in places you didn't know could get sore. And you're still climbing into a tank that doesn't care if your socks are wet or your collar's chafing your neck raw. You wear the uniform, and it wears you back. Morning is a suggestion out here. There's no real sunrise, just a gradual shift from black to grey. You know it's morning, not because of a clock or a schedule, but because your stomach starts reminding you it's been too long since it had anything remotely resembling food. The problem is, the definition of food gets flexible very fast. You don't eat breakfast because it's comforting or warm. You eat it because you need to. Because without calories, you can't move shells, can't rotate the turret, can't operate the controls. And out here, fatigue isn't a bad day. It's a death sentence. So you reach into the same crusty canvas satchel you've been hauling around since the last resupply, and pull out what passes for breakfast in a tiger tank on the Eastern Front. The first thing you notice is the temperature. Everything is cold, not cool. Cold, though your hands are already stiff from the weather. And now you're trying to peel open a tin of something gelatinous using a folding knife with a broken hinge. The can's metal stings your fingers. The lid bends instead of cutting clean. You wrestle it open and immediately regret the choice. The smell hits fast. Grease, iron, something like liver. It's called Fleischkonserve, meat in theory. In reality, it's a greyish paste that may or may not contain parts of a pig no one wants to think about. You scoop it out with a spoon, or your knife, or a chunk of stale bread if you still have some. The bread's so hard it could survive an artillery strike. If it dropped on your toe, you'd be limping for days. You break a piece off by sheer willpower, and it crumbles into dry, dusty chunks. No butter, no jam, just bread, and the meat product that's trying to escape from it. There's also ersatz coffee substitute. Looks like the real thing if you squint and ignore the smell. It's made from roasted barley or chicory or whatever plant material they could pass off as drinkable. There's no sugar unless you've traded for it, which you haven't, and there's no milk unless you're hallucinating. You pour hot water into your dented tin mug, drop in a scoop, stir it with the end of a shell casing, and drink quickly before it gets cold again. It never tastes good, but it's warm, and that's the only feature anyone cares about. If you're lucky, you might have something sweet. A biscuit, maybe. It'll be from a ration pack, stamped months ago, dry as chalk, possibly cracked, and tastes like the inside of your coat. Doesn't matter. You eat it anyway. It fills space. You chew it slowly so it lasts longer. The crumbs fall into your lap, into the crevices of the tank. No one bothers cleaning them up. They join the rest of the dirt, oil and debris underfoot. You're eating on top of layers of whatever's been spilled, dropped or forgotten since the last cleaning, which never happened. There's always someone in the tank who eats fast, doesn't talk, just shovels food in like he's afraid someone's going to take it away. Nobody does, but the instinct's still there. And someone else who takes too long, picking at their ration with the same knife they use to adjust bolts. You try not to watch. Everyone's got their own routine, their own ritual for making the food go down and stay down. You don't talk during breakfast. Not because it's sacred or anything like that. Just because there's nothing to say. No one wants to hear about your dreams. No one cares if you slept badly. Everyone did. Someone might mutter something about the coffee being worse than yesterday's. Someone else might cough, clear their throat, and go back to chewing. That's the extent of conversation. Sometimes the engine's already running while you eat. That's the worst version. The noise drowns out everything. The heat rises, even in the cold. Fumes leak into the crew space. Diesel, oil, burnt rubber. You're breathing it in while you chew, and it sticks to the back of your throat. Your ration tastes like gasoline. Your coffee tastes like exhaust. You finish eating with a film of grime on your tongue and lungs that feel heavier than when you woke up. There's no trash can. You stuff the empty can into a side pouch, or toss it in a pile that's already growing under the loader's seat. Later, someone will throw it out during a stop. Maybe, or not. Sometimes the pile just gets bigger until someone snaps and clears it. Usually the driver, because he's the one sitting closest to it. Your hands are greasy afterward. Always. No napkins, no soap, no water to spare. You wipe them on your uniform. The same uniform you've been wearing for 3 weeks. The same pants you sleep in. The same jacket that's already stiff with sweat and gunpowder. Cleanliness is theoretical now. The only thing that matters is that you can grip a shell and not drop it. That's good enough. If you need water, you drink from a canteen that tastes like old metal and chlorine. It's not cold, it's not fresh. But it doesn't freeze your teeth, and it doesn't kill you. That's the standard out here. You don't ask for more. Every so often, someone has something different. A tin of sardines, a square of chocolate from a Red Cross package, a pickled cucumber. It gets passed around like treasure, 1 bite per man. Nobody hoards. Not because they're generous, but because if you're the guy who doesn't share, nobody has your back when things go sideways. And things go sideways all the time. You finish your food and immediately wish you hadn't. Not because it was good, but because now it's gone. And you don't know when the next meal will happen. Could be lunch, could be 2 days from now. Depends on fuel, supplies, the enemy, the weather, or some officer's last-minute change of plan. You eat when you can, not when you're supposed to. There's no brushing your teeth, no mouthwash. You rinse your mouth with whatever liquid is available, spit it onto the floor plate, and call it a day. Your breath smells like liver paste and diesel. Everyone's does. It's just part of the air now. Then it's back to work. No clean-up, no rest, no digestion break. You shove the ration can into the pile, screw the cap back on your canteen, and grab whatever tool, shell, or lever is next on the checklist. Your stomach groans, not from hunger, but from processing whatever combination of preserved meat and fuel vapour it just received. And that's breakfast. It doesn't fuel you. It just delays the collapse. Getting the tiger moving isn't like turning a key and driving off. It's a process. A loud, dirty, unpredictable process that starts with equal parts prayer and profanity. The tank doesn't want to move. It never does. You have to convince it. You have to wake it up like a monster that hates being disturbed and might eat you if you touch the wrong part of its anatomy. First comes the prep. The commander gives a nod. The driver grunts. Nobody says, "Let's go." That would be too optimistic. You check everything you're supposed to check. Oil levels, coolant, gear levers, instrument panel. The instrument panel barely functions. Half the dials are fogged over or flickering. You tap them. They lie to you anyway. It's cold, which makes it worse. The colder it is, the more stubborn the engine gets. In summer, you worry about overheating. In winter, you worry the engine will seize up before it even starts. The oil moves like syrup, thick and grudging. You need to heat it. That usually means firing up the preheater system, which was designed by someone who clearly hated mechanics. It rarely works on the first try. So you start priming. Crank handles. Fuel levers. Battery switches. The engine is a Maybach HL230, a 700 horsepower V12 that sounds impressive, until you realise it's basically a racing engine stuffed into a steel coffin. It wasn't made for the Russian winter. It barely tolerates the German one, and it hates you personally. You hit the starter. It whines, a deep, metallic whir that sounds like the tank is coughing. Nothing happens. You wait a few seconds, try again. Same sound, a little louder. Still nothing. The commander doesn't say anything. Just glances at you, then at the horizon, then back at you. Pressure builds with every second that engine refuses to come to life. You try a third time. This one's different. There's a low rumble, a judder, then a stuttering roar like something enormous and angry just woke up from a 3-week nap. The hull vibrates. The air fills with the smell of hot oil and ancient smoke. You feel it in your ribs. You wince. You say nothing. The commander nods again. That means it's working, kind of. The whole tank begins to shudder. It doesn't idle, it thrashes. Like it resents being awake and wants everyone inside to know it. You feel it through the bench, through your boots, through the shell you're holding, which is now vibrating slightly in your hands. The floor shakes, the walls buzz. The sound is deafening, but that's normal. You stop noticing after a while. Then the fumes hit. You'd think the exhaust would stay outside. It doesn't. It seeps back in through the cracks in the hull, through the floor, through the engine compartment. It mixes with the diesel, the gun oil, the old socks, and the fear. Breathing becomes a conscious effort. You pull your scarf up over your mouth. Doesn't help? Nothing helps? The engine ticks over for a minute or two. You don't rush it. You let it warm up, like coaxing a wild animal. Touch the throttle too soon, and it will sputter and stall. Push it too hard, and it will blow something. Everything's fragile in a Tiger. Big, yes. Strong, technically, but also delicate. There are stories about tanks throwing rods during combat, entire engines seizing mid-fight. Stories no one laughs about. The driver shifts gears. First, it's always sticky. The lever resists like it's glued in place. You hear a loud clunk. That could be the gearbox, or could just be a warning. He tries again. It moves. The Tiger lurches forward like it wasn't quite ready, which it wasn't. None of you are. Moving is a victory, but it doesn't feel like one. It feels like being dragged forward by something larger than you, something with no interest in where you're going. The treads squeal against the frozen ground. The hull groans. Everything vibrates. Inside, you brace. Outside, snow sprays up from under the tracks. Mud flies. The tank begins to roll. The first 100 metres are the worst. The engine coughs. The track alignment feels off. You listen for noises that shouldn't be there. Metal rubbing, high-pitched grinding. Anything sharp. You don't always hear it over the roar. You learn to feel it instead. The seat shifts under you in the wrong way, and suddenly you're flagging down the driver. Something's about to fail. The loader keeps one hand on the ready rack, the other steadying himself against the side wall. You can't stand. You can't sit comfortably. You just sort of exist in a low crouch, braced against the tank's constant argument with physics. The gunner adjusts the optics. The commander peers through the periscope. You blink and try to ignore the smell. Then, inevitably, something makes a noise it shouldn't. A bang, a knock, a thunk. Everything stops. The driver says nothing. The commander curses under his breath. The engine's still running, but the Tiger won't move. Maybe it threw a track. Maybe the transmission jammed. Maybe it's just reminding you who's really in charge. You wait. The commander considers options. Reverse, adjust, try again. The engine revs, the tank shakes. The transmission whines like it's in pain. Then suddenly, it grabs, and you lurch forward so fast you hit your shoulder against the turret ring. You don't complain. You don't even curse. You just reset your position and try not to lose your grip on whatever you're holding. Now you're moving properly. Sort of. You hit a patch of frozen ground, and the tank slides slightly. Not enough to panic, just enough to remind you there's no traction. Then it bites. The tracks grind forward. You pick up speed. Not much, but enough to make you feel like you're part of something unstoppable again. It's a lie, of course, but it's a lie that helps. The commander calls out a heading. The driver adjusts. The hull groans with every turn. The road is a suggestion. The path is made up as you go. You're steering a mountain that doesn't like to change direction. When it does turn, everything inside shifts. You bump into the loader. The loader bumps into the shells. The shells rattle in their racks. You pass a tree line, then a wrecked building, then a crater. Each one a reminder that nothing here is permanent, not the terrain, not the structures, not the tank, not you. The engine roars louder. The Tiger starts climbing a shallow hill. The treads dig in. The frame shudders again. You reach for a brace point. Doesn't matter if you've done this 100 times. You still brace. Everyone does. At the top, you pause, not by choice. The tank hesitates, like it's tired already. The engine whines. A little steam hisses from a valve near the back. The smell of burning oil gets stronger. The commander leans forward. The driver presses the pedal again. Slowly the tank continues. This is how every movement starts. Not with confidence, not with a charge, with hesitation, with warning signs, with a machine that requires negotiation, constant management, and a good amount of superstition. The engine's running now, but everyone's watching it like it might stop at any second, because sometimes it does. Driving a Tiger tank is like trying to steer a refrigerator through a minefield with a sock over your head. You're not looking out at the world. You're not scanning the terrain with a panoramic view. You're staring through a slit. A literal slit. Maybe 2 inches tall, maybe 10 inches wide. That's it. That's your window to the world. Everything else, guesswork. The driver's slit is reinforced glass, backed by a steel plate that can slide down if things get dicey. When it's open, you get a limited, blurry tunnel vision of what's in front of you. Trees, snow, maybe the back of another tank if you're in a column. When it's closed, you're using a periscope, and that gives you even less. The periscope gets fogged up every few minutes. Then you're just seeing shapes, shadows, and movement you're praying isn't an ambush. No side mirrors, no rear view, no reverse camera. Your knowledge of what's behind or beside you is based entirely on yelling. The commander tells the driver what to do. The driver repeats it back. If it's wrong, someone gets thrown sideways, or the tank clips a tree or lands in a ditch that no one saw coming. Happens all the time. There are other viewports for the gunner and the commander, but they don't offer much more. The commander can rotate his cupola, peer through several angled slits, or through a rotating periscope if he has one installed. But even that only gives him a fraction of a view. It's not panoramic. It's not even functional half the time. If mud splashes up or snow cakes over the glass, visibility drops to 0. You wipe it with a rag, or your glove, or you just wait for the next bump to shake it loose. Peripheral vision doesn't exist. Everything outside the tank could be on fire, and you'd never know unless someone radioed it in or it started dripping onto your armour. If infantry are moving up on your flanks, you won't see them. If someone's waving at you to stop, they better be standing directly in front of your path or they're out of luck. The radio's supposed to help with this. Supposed to. But the radio isn't reliable. It crackles, cuts out, or decides to pick up someone else's channel just when you're trying to hear whether there's a minefield up ahead. Even when it works, there's a delay. By the time someone says left, you've already hit whatever was supposed to be avoided. So you drive blind, not in the poetic sense. In the literal, I have no idea what's happening outside this box sense. The terrain is uneven, the tank lurches, you hit bumps you don't see, holes you never expected, logs, rocks, frozen bodies. Sometimes the tank rides over them. Sometimes it gets stuck. Sometimes it just slides sideways and everyone inside grabs for something solid and braces for the worst. Speed doesn't help. The Tiger isn't fast, not on paper, not in practice. It crawls, even when it's functioning perfectly, and you wouldn't want it to go faster. At top speed, you lose what little control you have. The engine screams, the gears grind, and the whole frame feels like it might shake apart. There's no thrill, no wind in your hair, Just noise and motion and the knowledge that you're responsible for several dozen tons of steel that could fall into a ditch or take out an entire squad of your own troops if you make the wrong turn. Navigation is another nightmare. You don't have a GPS. You don't have a map in front of you. The commander might have one, if it's still accurate. If it wasn't printed 2 months ago and based on terrain that's since been bombed into something unrecognisable. You follow compass bearings. You follow orders. You follow tracks in the snow. Sometimes you follow the vague idea of what feels like the right direction and hope no one notices if you're a little off course. Obstacles come fast, and when they do, your reaction time is nothing. You don't see the trench until you're already in it. You don't see the tree stump until it punches into the suspension. You don't see the anti-tank ditch until the front end's hanging over it like a steel teeter-totter. There are no brakes sharp enough to save you from that. You stop when you hit something. That's the default method. Communication inside the tank doesn't improve things. You shout over the engine. The gunner can't hear you. The loader's focused on keeping the next round ready. The commander's barking directions, but they come in bursts. Left, stop, back, forward, no, not that way. And you try to interpret them fast enough to avoid disaster. You develop instincts, muscle memory, a feel for the terrain based on how the treads shift under you, a guess about what kind of slope you're on based on how much the tank leans. You notice patterns in the way the vibration changes. If it gets sharper, you're on rocks. If it softens, you're in mud. If it disappears, you're airborne, and that's very bad. Every now and then, someone opens a hatch for better visibility. It's risky. A sniper could be watching. A mortar round could land while your head's sticking out. But sometimes it's the only way to see what you're about to drive into. The commander pops the cupola, takes a quick glance, yells back a correction, slams it shut again. His face always looks 10 years older when he does. Snow makes it worse. It covers everything. Trenches, mines, fences, wreckage. What looks like flat ground could be a crater. What looks like a clear path could be ice. What looks like cover could be a burned out vehicle ready to collapse. You drive slowly, carefully, like every inch is a trap. Because it probably is. When it's foggy, you may as well be buried alive. No lights. That'd give away your position. No headlights. Those are off unless you're so far from the front it doesn't matter. So you crawl through white nothingness. Every shape a threat. Every sound a warning. The tank becomes a blind rhino. Powerful, armoured and nearly helpless. Getting stuck is just a matter of time. Snow drifts, mud pits, loose rubble. You feel the traction drop, the weight shift, and suddenly the tank isn't moving. The engine groans, the tread spin. Everyone inside tenses. You try reverse, nothing. You try rocking it, still nothing. Then comes the real fun. Climbing out into the open in enemy territory to check the damage, dig out the track, or call for help that might never arrive. So you stay focused, hyper-focused. Not because you're confident, but because you're scared. Because you know there's no room for error. Because you've seen what happens when someone misses a tree line by 5 feet or drives into a ditch at the wrong angle. You saw what was left of the last crew. Driving a Tiger isn't glory. It's pressure. Constant, exhausting pressure. You don't see the war. You feel it through your fingertips, your knees, your spine. You feel it every time the ground shifts unexpectedly, or the tank jolts for reasons no one can explain. You feel it every time you try to make a turn and can't tell if you're heading into safety or into a kill zone. You don't see the battlefield. You feel its edges pressing against your steel box, trying to get in. The first shot always comes without warning. Not a slow build-up, not a tense standoff, not a dramatic announcement, just boom. A sharp, cracking noise in the distance. Or maybe not in the distance at all. Maybe it lands close. Maybe it hits something nearby. Maybe it hits you. You don't hear it the way it happens in films. There's no dramatic whistle. Just an explosion. A vibration. A sound that slams into the side of the tank and makes everything inside jump. You duck automatically, even if the shell already missed. Reflex, not logic, the commander yells. The gunner swings into action. The loader's already reaching for the next round. Everyone knows their job. You know yours. You brace. You listen. You get ready for whatever part you're meant to play. Because now you're in it. The Tiger has an 80mm gun. It's long, it's loud, and when it fires, it doesn't ask questions. It just erupts. When the round goes off, it feels like someone hit the inside of your skull with a frying pan. The sound isn't just noise, it's pressure. The blast punches through the space and rattles your lungs. You feel it in your teeth. The gun recoils, the turret groans, and if you weren't ready, you end up half on the floor. The loader is already grabbing the next shell. 40+ pounds of steel and explosive. He moves fast, because the slower he moves, the slower you fire, and the longer you're sitting still in a field full of people trying to kill you. He shoves the round into the breech. It locks with a click. Another target gets called out. Another thunderclap. The tank shifts with every shot. Not dramatically. Just enough to feel it. You can tell when you've hit something solid. There's a deeper note in the echo. A satisfying jolt that runs up your spine. But you don't get to dwell on it. For every shell you fire, someone else is firing back. Enemy tanks are out there. T-4s. Fast, manoeuvrable, hard to track when they're using trees and smoke for cover. Sometimes they show up, take a few shots, and vanish. Other times they come straight at you in packs. That's when it gets real quiet inside the tank. Not because no one's talking, because everyone is breathing through their teeth, focused, trying to stay ahead of what's coming next. Then the Soviets bring out the infantry. You don't see them either. You see shapes. Movement. Maybe a flash. Then a bottle arcs through the air. Glass filled with gasoline, and something worse. It hits the armour, breaks, and the flames crawl across the engine deck like angry snakes. The driver curses. The commander yells for the extinguisher. You grab it, spray it, pray it works. The fire doesn't always go out. Sometimes it just finds another place to settle. The tank wasn't made for this kind of close-range ambush. It's a sniper, not a brawler. It's a cathedral on treads, not a knife fighter. But that doesn't matter when you're surrounded. You rotate the turret. You pivot the barrel. You fire at whatever you can. Buildings. Trees, snowbanks that might be hiding something. You don't get confirmation, you just shoot and hope. Every round you fire makes the tank hotter. The metal heats up. The air thickens. The smoke from the cannon leaks back in. You cough. Everyone does. The loader's face is dripping sweat, even though it's freezing outside. The periscopes fog. The gear stinks. Your uniform clings to your back like a wet rag, and there's no time to adjust anything. Then comes the next shell. You don't see it coming. You just feel it. An impact that shakes the whole hull. Maybe it hit the front plate. Maybe it scraped the side. Maybe it bounced off the turret ring. You don't know. The commander checks the damage by listening. The driver adjusts course. You say nothing and brace again. Sometimes a hit penetrates. That's when everything happens at once. Heat, noise, smoke, screaming. You don't always get a warning. You don't always get a second chance. Sometimes the shell goes through clean. Sometimes it shatters inside, and everything sharpens. Shrapnel, flame, splinters of steel that rip through space faster than your brain can process. That's why you sit hunched. That's why you wear your helmet even when it's uncomfortable. That's why you never, ever let yourself relax. The tiger is tough. It can take a hit, but only from certain angles. Only in certain conditions. The armour's thickest at the front. The sides are weaker. The back, don't think about the back. If they get behind you, you're done. Everyone knows it. The commander keeps scanning. The gunner swivels. The loader grabs another round. The driver keeps moving. Nobody says it out loud, but everyone knows this could be the moment the armour stops working. Shells keep coming. Mortars now. That's different. That's top down. You hear a whistle this time, then an impact, maybe nearby, maybe too close. The tank rocks, dust and rust flakes fall from the ceiling. A bolt comes loose somewhere and rolls across the floor like a metal coin of bad luck. You're not moving fast. The tiger never moves fast. And that makes you a target. A big one. A valuable one. Soviet gunners know what a tiger looks like. They know its weaknesses. They call it out the second they see you. And once you're spotted, it's open season. Artillery, tank destroyers, anything with enough punch and a line of sight. You start hearing that specific clank. Not the tank. Not the gun. The sound of something pinging off the armour. Small arms fire, ricochets. Rifle rounds hitting the hull like insects against a windshield. You ignore them. They don't matter. Not unless someone gets close with explosives. Not unless the hatches get popped. Not unless they find the weak spots. Sometimes they do. Sometimes you see the effects before you understand what happened. Smoke coming through the floor vent. A sudden loss of pressure. A noise that isn't just loud, it's final. A hiss, a scream, a snap of cable or bone. Something explodes nearby, inside, too close. You shout for help. The commander's yelling. The loader's down. You try to move, but the heat's rising. The ammo's still in the rack. The tank's still running. You're still alive, but for how long, no one's sure. And even if you survive the hit, you're not done. There's no pause, no reset. You reload, you refocus, you fire again. Another target, another flash. Another round fired into a blur of smoke and trees. Your hands shake, your shoulders ache. Your brain feels like it's vibrating inside your skull. You forget who you're shooting at. You stop looking for uniforms. You just track motion, aim, and squeeze the trigger. Over and over. Until the noise becomes the only thing you hear. Until your ears ring between every shot. Until you don't even flinch when the next impact comes. Because inside the tiger, in combat, you're not the hunter. You're not the apex predator. You're a moving bullseye with a very big gun. And everyone's aiming right at you. The thing about facing the Soviets on the Eastern Front is you're not just up against an army. You're up against weather, terrain, numbers, and a level of determination that doesn't make sense until you're staring down the barrel of it. There's no warning, no grand manoeuvre, no trumpet blast. Just motion in the tree line, black smoke curling up in the distance, and the quiet instinctual feeling that you're no longer alone in this field. Then it starts. Sometimes it's a shell, sometimes a burst of machine gun fire, but often it's a Molotov cocktail arcing through the air, silent, glowing, and impossibly fast. It spins lazily before smashing it against the hull and lighting the world up in orange. Flames spread instantly, licking over the engine deck and searching for anything flammable. The tank wasn't built for this kind of close-range swarm. You're in a fortress, but one that panics under fire. The driver reacts first, slams the gear, backs up, hard. The engine screams. The treads fight for grip on ice and mud. You bounce in your seat. The crew scrambles. One man grabs the fire extinguisher. Another opens the rear hatch just enough to throw out the burning mess. The fumes flood in. It smells like burning fuel and cooked metal. The tank doesn't stop. The fire might be out, but the threat isn't. Because where there's one Molotov, there are more. Soviet infantry loves them. Cheap. Simple. Devastating. A few bottles, a few brave souls with rags and vodka bottles full of fuel, and even a tiger starts to sweat. You can't shoot them all. They're fast, low to the ground, and always too close by the time you see them. Then come the tanks. T-34s, mostly. They're everywhere. You see one crest a ridge, then another appears from behind a pile of rubble. They're smaller, faster, easier to replace, and they move like they know it. While your gunner is still rotating the turret, the first T-34 is already darting left, trying to get behind you. That's the game. They don't want a straight fight. They want your sides. They want your rear armour. They want the spot where your glorious tiger becomes just another burning wreck on the steppe. You rotate the turret, slowly, too slowly. The loader shoves a shell into the breech. It locks. The gunner lines up the shot. Fires. The tank shudders. You don't even look to see if it hit. You assume it did, because missing means you're wasting time you don't have. But the other T-1234's already flanking. You try to pivot the hull. The driver guns it. The tank groans. Tracks chew into frozen earth. You spin, but not fast enough. The turret can't keep up. The gun's still swinging to the right when another shell slams into the side of your armour. The impact is muffled, like a fist hitting a wall. Didn't penetrate, but it rattles everything. A crate tips. A loose shell rolls. You brace yourself against the recoil guard and bite your tongue, literally. The commander's yelling now. Directions, distances, targets. He can't see everything either. Smoke is everywhere. Your optics are fogged. One of the viewports has a crack. Doesn't matter. You fire again. This time it's close, too close. You watch the round, leave the barrel, and hit something metal and green. The T-34 erupts. Fireball, debris. Chunks of track and turret fly upward, spin and rain back down in ugly shapes. The ground shakes. For a second, you feel like maybe you're winning. Then you realise there are more. Always more. The Soviets don't stop. They keep coming. Over hills, through burned out buildings. Across fields you thought were empty. You hit 1, 2, 3. But they keep appearing. Like water seeping through a crack. The Tiger was built to dominate, on paper. In the field, against endless waves of determined attackers, it starts to feel like a heavy, lumbering liability. Ammo gets low. That's the next panic. The loader calls it out. You check the racks. 8 shells left. Then 6. Then 3. Every round becomes a question. Is this one going to save us? Or should we hold it for the next tank that might come around the corner? Then the infantry gets closer. Rifles, machine guns, grenades. The Tiger isn't invincible to small arms, but it's not immune to luck. And all it takes is one Soviet with a sticky charge and no fear. You can't see them all. They're running between trees, ducking behind craters. Some crawl right up to the sides. You hear the clang of boots or fists or something hitting the exterior. Someone's trying to climb you. Someone's trying to drop something down the hatch. Your sidearm's useless. There's no room to draw it. You grab a wrench, or the butt of your helmet, or your elbow. Slam the hatch shut and hope the locking pin holds. The loader's already swinging the turret to try to blast a group out of cover, but the gun doesn't aim that low. You're too big, too slow, and now too close to fire. The smell of fire returns. Not from outside this time. From inside. Something near the rear vent. The engine's too hot. The fire that hit earlier didn't go out completely. It hid. Now it's back. Someone's screaming. You don't know who. It might be you. You vent the engine bay. Smoke pours in. You cough until your ribs hurt. Your eyes burn. You reach for the fire system. It doesn't work. You try the backup. It sputters. Someone pours water from a canteen over a hot panel. Steam hisses, adding to the chaos. The radio crackles. You hear orders. Pull back. Or maybe hold the line. Or maybe it's just noise. The commander slams the headset down. His hands are shaking. Outside, another Molotov hits. The whole tank rocks. You grab whatever you can to stay upright. The turret ring locks. The gun won't rotate. You're a sitting target now. You reload, but the next shell might not matter. The T-34 that disappeared earlier comes back into view, circling wide. You see the muzzle flash, then black. After the smoke clears, assuming it does, you're still inside the Tiger. You're still breathing. The tank didn't burn this time. That's the good news. The bad news? Something broke. You don't know what yet. You just know the engine doesn't sound right. The controls aren't responding the way they should. Something under your seat is vibrating harder than it did yesterday, and there's a smell you can't quite place. Something metallic. Something that usually means stop moving immediately. Mechanical failure is not an event out here. It's a routine. The Tiger was over-engineered. German craftsmanship, precision design, complex parts, tight tolerances, stuff that looks great in a factory, on a test track, in a propaganda film. But out here, in the mud and ice, 100 kilometres from anything resembling a workshop, it's a problem. A big one. You start hearing things before anyone says it out loud. A grind when the turret rotates. A wheeze in the brakes. The clutch pedal sinks too far. The gear doesn't engage right away. One of the periscopes suddenly doesn't move anymore. These aren't combat problems. They're wear and tear. And they pile up. The gearbox is always the first suspect. It's an 850 horsepower Maybach V trying to push 54 tons of armour through ground. That's barely passable in a Jeep. It runs hot. It burns oil like it's a hobby. It needs constant attention. And when it doesn't get it, it starts to let you know. A delayed gear shift turns into a jammed transmission. A loose gear selector becomes a snapped linkage. The whole system groans like it's 2 missed greasings away from eating itself. You tell the commander. He nods. Tells you to keep moving. Because what else are you going to do? The turret rotation system starts lagging. You crank the manual traverse, and it's stiff. Way stiffer than it should be. Could be frozen lubricant. Could be damage from the last hit. Could be a hydraulic line leaking somewhere. You don't have tools to fix it properly. You barely have rags, so you wipe the grease off your gloves and try to work the crank until your shoulder starts to burn. That's the repair method now. Apply brute force and hope it doesn't make things worse. Then it's the suspension. The torsion bars underneath are what keep this beast from shaking itself to pieces. They work fine, until they don't. One day the tank rides like it's floating on steel clouds. The next day, every bump feels like someone kicking you in the spine with a brick. You hear it too. The suspension doesn't just give out, it screams first. Loud metal-on-metal shrieks that echo inside the hull and bounce around your skull like a wasp with a grudge. You report that too. Another nod. Keep going. Maybe it'll last. Sometimes you throw a track. That's not a hypothetical. It happens. Maybe you hit something too sharp. Maybe the ground was too soft. Maybe the guide horns sheared off again. Doesn't matter. You know it the second the tank lurches sideways and stops responding. Everyone groans, not because it's dramatic, but because they know what comes next. Someone has to get out. Out of the tank. Into the open in front of God, enemy snipers, and every bad decision that brought you here. You unbolt the hatch, haul yourself up and over, and drop into freezing mud with your boots sinking past the ankles. Then you walk around the tank, ducking under the gun, and there it is, the track, half off, looped like a dead snake around the drive sprocket. Now it's a job, and not a short one. You grab the sledge, the pry bar, the replacement links, if you have them. If not, good luck. You and another crewman start working. 10 minutes in, your gloves are soaked, your shoulders are numb, and your breath's coming out in ragged bursts. You can't feel your fingers. The steel is freezing. The pins won't go back in. Someone yells about enemy movement. You don't even look up. You're not even surprised. And that's just one kind of failure. Other times it's the radio. The set was fine yesterday. Now it's cutting out. You check the wiring. Looks okay. Still doesn't transmit. You tap the box. Nothing. You smack it harder. Suddenly it works. Then it cuts out again 5 minutes later. Nobody understands why. The guy who did got blown up 2 weeks ago. Or the optics fog. That happens a lot. Moisture creeps in, freezes, then fogs again. You wipe it off, only for it to reappear. Sometimes there's mould. Actual mould. Inside the viewfinder. You squint through the periscope like you're trying to see through the bottom of a whiskey bottle and just pretend you know what you're aiming at. Wiring shorts. Switches fail. Interior lights flicker or go out completely. Sometimes the ventilation system seizes and the cabin starts to fill with exhaust. You open the hatch to breathe, and a sniper round skims off the edge before you can blink. You slam it shut and choke on diesel instead. The gun sometimes misfires. Not often, but when it does, you feel it. A dead click instead of a bang. Or worse, a jammed breech. Now the loader's wrestling a live shell out of a hot metal mouth while the gunner leans back and prays. If it cooks off inside, everyone in the tank becomes a name on a report. And through all of this, you're still expected to keep moving. That's the real trick. The tank doesn't stop unless it's dead. You drive until the track breaks. You fire until the gun won't load. You shout into the radio until it starts spitting sparks. Then you improvise. Then you push. Then you climb out and start dragging the damn thing through snow by hand, if that's what it takes. Because calling for recovery? That's a fantasy. There's no tow truck behind you. No rescue team waiting in the trees. If your tank breaks down and you can't fix it fast, it's abandoned. Left for the Soviets to shell, capture, or burn. Sometimes you destroy it yourself, plant charges inside and walk away. Walk, with your feet, through the same snow and mud you thought you were too good for because you had armour. And the worst part, most of these breakdowns don't come from damage. They come from the tank just being tired, metal fatigue, friction, cold, age. The Tiger was expensive to build, hard to maintain, and full of tiny, high-precision parts that didn't like being cold, dirty, or shaken violently every 6 minutes. The tank gets tired, and when it does, it lets you know. Not all at once, bit by bit, a little grinding here, a delay there, a squeal that turns into a snap. Until finally it stops responding. Just sits there in the snow like a monument to arrogance, and you're still inside it, listening to it die. You think you've been cold before. You haven't. Not like this. Not the kind of cold that crawls through solid steel. Not the kind that seeps into machinery and skin with equal malice. Not the kind that doesn't just bite. It sits on your chest and waits for you to stop moving. Winter on the Eastern Front isn't weather. It's an enemy. Relentless, silent, and absolutely impartial. It doesn't care who you fight for. It doesn't care how many tanks you've got. How many men. How many victories. It just wants you still. And it gets what it wants eventually. Inside the Tiger, you don't escape it. You sit in a box made of metal, surrounded by engine parts, ammunition, other men, and exactly zero insulation. The tank gets cold faster than you do. Overnight, it turns into a meat locker. By morning, your breath is hanging in the air like smoke, and your fingers have stopped working properly. The seats are cold, the controls are cold, the shells are cold. You have to touch them anyway. You keep your gloves on until you can't feel the dials anymore, then take them off and curse as your fingers stick to the steel. There's no warm-up. You go straight from sleep, if you slept, to freezing pain. Starting the engine is a battle all its own. Cold oil doesn't move. Fuel thickens. Batteries drain. You try to fire it up, and all you get is a weak cough, like the tank itself is too tired to bother. Sometimes it takes 20 minutes to get the engine running. Sometimes you have to heat the oil manually with torches. Sometimes you just sit and hope the sun does enough to let the damn thing wake up. Even when it starts, the cold doesn't leave. The engine produces heat, sure, but it takes time. And most of that heat goes out the exhaust, not into the crew compartment. You're still frozen. The metal walls sweat with condensation, which immediately freezes into frost. Every breath fogs your vision. Every word spoken vanishes in a puff of white vapour. Frost forms inside the tank. On the periscopes, on the walls, on your eyebrows. You scrape it off with the edge of your helmet. It comes back. The inside of the hatch rim gets a lining of ice. The ventilation fan ices over. One man tried to keep his water canteen next to the engine. It melted, then refroze with the cap off. He had a solid block of ice for the next 3 days. You lose sensation in your toes first, then your fingers. Then you stop feeling your knees unless you bump them on something. You stop worrying about comfort and start worrying about circulation. You flex your hands constantly, rub them together, sit on them. Anything to keep the blood moving. You eat frozen bread. You try to chew it and it snaps in half. The meat paste in the tin is congealed into something closer to plaster. Coffee? Only if you can find a way to heat water, and even then it goes cold before you finish half the mug. You drink it anyway, because the alternative is nothing. Everything gets brittle. Your equipment, your skin, your nerves. Bolts snap. Handles break. Hinges freeze. You force them open and something inside gives way. Not always the metal, sometimes it's just your patience. The barrel of the main gun gets so cold it develops a layer of rime that has to be scraped off before firing. Otherwise, the first round might crack the liner. You don't want that. The snow doesn't help. It's not soft, not fluffy. It's dense, wet, and packed like cement. The tracks churn it into slush that then freezes to the wheels. Mud that was soft and miserable last week is now hard as rock. If the tank gets stuck, there's no digging it out with a shovel. You need explosives or a tow, which doesn't exist. So you don't get stuck. You avoid ditches. You avoid slopes. You avoid confidence. Frostbite is constant. There's always someone in the crew with darkened fingertips, cracked lips, skin flaking off in layers. Nobody mentions it. What's the point? If it gets bad enough, you wrap it. If it gets worse, you stop using that finger. If it goes black, you hide it. Nobody wants to be the reason the crew gets pulled from duty. No one wants to get left behind. Or worse, reassigned. Night is the worst. It's not just cold. It's dead. Silent. The engine's off. No movement. Just wind. And the occasional groan of contracting metal. You sleep in shifts, fully clothed, curled into yourself, trying to keep your breath inside your scarf. If someone shifts and bumps you, you grunt. Maybe you swear. Then roll over and pretend you didn't feel your hip grind against the armour plating. If you have to go outside to relieve yourself, it's a negotiation. You argue about who did it last. Who has the driest boots? Who's already awake? Then someone volunteers, climbs out, and does what needs doing while muttering curses into the snow. You never go far. You don't want to get lost in the white. You stop talking about the cold. After a while it becomes a background noise. Not because it's gone, but because mentioning it doesn't do anything. It's always there. It's part of the air. Part of the tank. Part of the war. You wear it. Like your uniform. Like the stink. Like the fatigue. When the tank moves, you get some warmth. Barely. The engine helps. The motion helps. But now you're sweating under your layers, and that's worse. Sweat is the enemy. It soaks your clothes. Then you stop, and the cold turns that sweat into ice. Now your shirt is a freezing compress. Your socks are wet. You can't dry them. You just endure. Some tanks have heaters. Not yours. Yours has hope, and that ran out 2 days ago. You try to be careful with the metal inside. Don't touch it with bare skin. That's how you lose fingerprints. And maybe a few chunks of your hand. One guy leaned his head back against the whole wall and lost a patch of hair when he shifted. It just stuck and pulled off like tape. Nobody laughed. They just nodded. The fuel lines freeze. The oil thickens. The gears seize. The Tiger doesn't like winter. It wasn't made for it. But neither were you. The difference is the tank gets to stop. Eventually, you don't. There's a certain sound a tiger makes when it's hungry. Not a literal sound. It's more in the way the engine falters, the gun stays quiet, and the crew starts speaking in shorter sentences. You feel it when the fuel gauge drops under a quarter, and the commander doesn't say anything. You feel it when you pull the next shell from the rack and realise the ready storage is almost empty. The Tiger needs 3 things to keep going: fuel, ammunition, and luck. You rarely have all 3. Most days you're down to 1.5. Let's talk about fuel first. You burn through it fast. The Tiger guzzles fuel like it's being dared. Over 500 litres just to move 100 kilometres on a road, less than half that if you're pushing through snow or mud or over wreckage. The numbers stop meaning anything after a while. All you know is that the fuel drums are empty again, and the convoy hasn't come. convoys are always late, or missing, or bombed. The Soviets know exactly what to hit. They don't go after the tanks if they can help it. They go after the trucks behind them. The ones carrying fuel cans and ammo crates. One well-placed artillery barrage, and your lifeline turns into a smoking crater. You don't recover from that. You sit and wait, and wonder if the next batch will make it through. When the fuel gets low, the commander gets quiet. He starts planning routes that take you down hills instead of up. He tells the driver to keep the RPMs low. Don't idle. Don't reverse unless you have to. Don't waste a single litre. The Tiger might look like it owns the battlefield, but it runs on fumes and caution. There's no guarantee you'll be topped off tomorrow. The last resupply was 2 weeks ago. The cans they brought were half frozen, dented, and reeking of desperation. You siphoned what you could, spilled more than you'd like. Every drop mattered. Some of the fuel drums had water in them. Someone back in the rear must have been refilling them to stretch the supply. You cursed them, then used the water to rinse your boots, and then there's the ammunition. It doesn't come in endless stacks. It doesn't magically appear after each battle. Every shell you fire is one you might not get back. You carry a mix, armour-piercing, high explosive, smoke if you're lucky. Most of the time you get what they send. Sometimes it's the wrong calibre entirely. You hand it back, wait another day, and hope the next truck knows what a Tiger uses. Each 88 Mittel shell weighs about 40 pounds. It takes 2 hands and a strong back to move them. They come packed in crates you have to heave into the turret one by one. The loader counts them every morning, mentally, quietly. He knows exactly how many are left at any given moment. So does the commander. So do you. When you get low, the conversations change. You stop firing at half-seen shadows. You stop warning shots. You don't soften up a position. You wait until you know you'll hit something. And even then, you hesitate. You save your best rounds for enemy armour. T-34. Fire. Su-85. Definitely fire. But a dug-in machine gun nest? You think twice. That's what rifles and grenades are for. Let the infantry deal with it. If you still have infantry. The loader grabs the next shell and hesitates. Looks at the label. AP. That's one of only 3 left. He says nothing. Just holds it a little longer than usual before slamming it into the breech. You both hear the clunk. You both know the number just dropped again. You start scavenging. From knocked out tanks. From abandoned vehicles. From anything with wheels and a fuel cap. The rules get flexible. If it burns, you use it. If it explodes, you try to make it fit. One day you'll blow yourself up trying, but not today. Sometimes you trade. A few litres of fuel for a case of shells. A working radio for a map. Rations for spark plugs. Nobody asks where the gear came from. You trade with engineers, with artillery crews, with units from other divisions. If you're lucky, they're German. If you're not, you don't ask. You just nod, make the swap, and move on before someone changes their mind. Every day the tank gets lighter. Not because of damage, because you're running out of everything that gives it power. Fewer shells, less fuel, less margin for error. The commander starts making jokes about running on fumes, about firing empty shell casings at the Soviets. The loader doesn't laugh, neither do you. Then comes the worst kind of situation. The tank's fine, the crew's ready, the battle's happening, and you can't move. No fuel, no ammo, just 54 tons of cold steel parked in the snow, waiting for permission to become a wreck. So you shut the engine off. Conserve what's left. Wrap yourself in your coat. Count the shells. Mark down what's usable. And wait for the next supply run that might not come. Sometimes it does. Sometimes it doesn't. And sometimes the Soviets get there first. There's a moment of stillness on the Eastern Front that doesn't feel right. No gunfire, no engines, no yelling. Just wind, maybe a few birds if it's not too cold, maybe the creak of branches under snow. It doesn't last long, and it doesn't bring comfort. Because when it's that quiet, someone always says the same thing. Where's the Luftwaffe? And that's the question no one ever answers. Not because they don't know, because they're afraid they do. The German Air Force used to mean something back at the start, in Poland, in France. If something flew overhead, it was probably friendly. It meant help, control, air superiority. Then came the Soviets. Then came the losses. Then came the shift. Now, if you hear an engine in the sky, it's time to pray, run, or die. You don't hear them right away. That's part of the danger. Soviet aircraft come low and fast, often from behind cloud cover, banking just enough to reveal their silhouettes right before they strike. By the time you recognise what it is, Il-2 probably, it's already too late. The Tiger has no anti-air capabilities. None. There's no AA gun, no machine gun on a Pintle mount. Just the coaxial in the turret, and that only points forward. If a plane dives at you, the only response you have is to hope they're aiming at someone else. The Sturmovik isn't subtle. It was built for one thing, destroying tanks. It flies low, carries rockets or bombs or cannon pods, and it doesn't need a direct hit. Even a near miss is enough. The Tiger's armour can take punishment from other tanks, sure, but when a bomb hits a metre away and lifts half your track off the ground, all the armour in the world won't save you from what comes next. The first sign is usually the sound, not a whistle, not a roar, a buzzing. Fast, mean, metallic. It cuts through the clouds and hits your ears like a warning you were never meant to ignore. The commander grabs his binoculars, swings the periscope, curses, then shouts the only word anyone needs to hear. Aircraft. The driver doesn't wait. He floors it if the tank has fuel. If not, you're stuck. If it's already off, you scramble to start it, fumbling switches with gloved fingers while your stomach drops. Then comes the first strike. You hear the shriek of a dive, then impact, not on you, this time, somewhere nearby. A plume of dirt erupts, a crater opens, and the whole tank shudders. You close the hatches. Not because they'll save you, just because you don't want to see what happens if they hit you square. Inside the Tiger, there's no defence. There's only waiting. You feel like a turtle being circled by hawks. You can't shoot back. You can't manoeuvre fast enough to matter. The gunner just waits, hands resting on the controls, listening, helpless. The next rocket hits closer. You feel it through the track. The loader looks up like he can see through the ceiling. He can't. He's just waiting for the moment the world turns upside down. When it hits directly, you don't always know. It's not cinematic. It's instant. 1 second you're holding a shell, the next you're upside down, ears ringing, mouth full of smoke and dirt. If you're lucky, the blast doesn't breach the armour. If you're not, it rips open the engine deck, cooks off the fuel, and the whole thing turns into a steel oven. Sometimes the bomb doesn't even have to hit. A nearby explosion flips the tank into a crater. Not completely over, just enough to throw the balance off. The treads come loose. One of the suspension arms snaps. The whole tank becomes immobile. Now you're sitting in a broken fortress, deaf and blind, and marked for the next pass. The planes don't stop after one run. They circle back, again and again. Sometimes they don't even care if you're dead. They just want to make sure. You sit there, listening to the sky, trying to figure out which sound means another dive. When the whine drops in pitch, that's the one. That's when the bombs come. Other tanks around you are smoking. Some are burning. You can see black columns rising through the periscope, curling into the sky like a funeral procession. You can't help them. You can't even help yourself. The commander tries the radio. Static. Maybe the antenna was clipped. Maybe the battery's dead. Maybe the unit he's calling is gone. Doesn't matter. He calls anyway. You watch his mouth form the same words again and again. His eyes are locked on the sky. When the air attack finally ends, and it always ends eventually, you don't feel relief. You feel dread, because now you have to assess the damage. First, you check for movement. Can the turret still rotate? Can the driver shift gears? Did the engine survive? Is there a hole in the roof you didn't notice? You test the hatch. If it opens, someone sticks their head out, fast, just for a second, then drops back in, pale. Tracks are off. Engine's smoking. Radio's gone. Every word is another nail in the coffin. Now you're just a wreck waiting to be looted or shelled. There's no protocol for this. If you can't move, you send up a signal, if you have one. If the air is clear, you wait for recovery. If it's not, you destroy the tank, scuttle it, plant charges in the breach, in the engine, burn the maps, wipe the code books, walk away. Except walking away means stepping out of the only protection you had, into a frozen, wide-open battlefield with enemy aircraft still circling and no cover in sight. And you walk fast, because when the real enemy comes from above, there is no line to hold. There is no gun to fire. No amount of armour will save you. The sky doesn't care about armour, and it never misses twice. You think about it all the time. What happens if a shell gets through? What it feels like? What it sounds like? What it does? Every man in the tank has imagined it. You don't talk about it, but you know. Everyone knows. Sometimes it's fast. Other times it's worse. Getting hit isn't like in the manuals. There's no warning light, no smooth vibration, no polite note from physics. It's an interruption. A sudden, brutal one. 1 second you're shouting across the turret. The next, your ears are ringing and you're on the floor and nothing is where it was supposed to be. It always starts with the sound. A metallic crack, deeper than a rifle, harder than an explosion. It's a thunk that skips your ears and goes straight to your chest. You feel it before you understand it. The armour's been hit. Maybe it held. Maybe not. If it held, you're lucky. But even a non-penetrating hit does damage. Shock waves ripple through a hole. Bolts rattle loose. Your back slams against the bulkhead. Your wrist twists the wrong way as you're thrown sideways. You taste copper and realise you bit your tongue. Again? If it didn't hold, if the shell got through, everything happens at once. There's no warning, just a flash. A bright, white-hot burst that turns the inside of the tank into a furnace. Not from fire, yet, but from the sheer speed of metal slicing through steel. Armour penetration isn't neat, it's violent. The round enters, shatters, and sprays molten fragments in every direction. It's not a bullet. It's a steel comet dragging shrapnel behind it like a tail. You don't get to watch it happen, you just feel heat, pain, noise, pressure. then silence. Deafening, pulsing silence. The shell might hit the ammo rack. If it does, that's it. There's no time for anything else. No heroics, no evacuation, no screaming. Just a sharp crack as the rack cooks off, followed by a flash that tears the turret off like a bottle cap. Sometimes it hits the engine. The back erupts. Flames flood the crew compartment through the ventilation ducts. The smoke is black, thick, fast. It burns your eyes before you know it's there. You cough once, then twice, and your lungs start to close. Maybe it hits the gunner. A fragment, a spark, a shockwave. Doesn't take much. The sound of someone dying in a tank is short. A breath, a grunt, a thud. There's no time to look. You can't afford it. You keep moving. Keep shouting. Because someone has to. Maybe it's the loader. 1 second he's ramming a shell into the breach, the next he's gone. The space is still there, but he's not. Just blood, heat, and the smell. You can't stop. You have to move his body, or what's left of it, or at least his arm so you can reload. Because the next shot is coming, and this tank still has a job to do. Your ears are ringing. You can't hear the commander. He's yelling something. You nod. Pretend. Focus on the next thing, whatever that is. Maybe the shell just ricocheted inside. That happens. It enters at a bad angle, bounces off the inner wall, and spins through the crew like a blender made of nightmares. It doesn't stop. Doesn't care. You're all just noise and heat to it. The lights flicker. Not that they help. The turret might be jammed. The controls might be fused. The radios might be dead. The periscope is cracked. The optics are full of smoke. Everything smells like burning rubber and old blood. You think you're moving. Or maybe the world is spinning. Hard to say. Then there's the fire. It doesn't look like a movie. No roaring inferno. Just creeping flames, licking along wires, pooling under the floor, eating at your boots. You notice it when your legs feel too hot. You stomp. Doesn't help. Someone grabs the extinguisher. It's empty. Someone else pulls a jacket off the wall and tries to beat the fire back into the cracks it came from. It doesn't work. The commander makes a call. Abandon tank. That's not a plan. It's a sentence. Climbing out of a Tiger under fire is not quick. There's a hatch in the turret. There's another in the driver's compartment. Both are awkward. Both are slow. Both are exposed. The loader, if he's still alive, goes first. Or tries to. The turret's turned the wrong way. The breach is in the way. The smoke is too thick. You help shove him toward the light. You can't see anything. You just hope the hatch is still there. The commander waits. Because he has to. Because it's his tank. His crew. He makes sure everyone else gets out before him. If there's time. Sometimes there's not. Sometimes the second hit comes while you're climbing. And that's the one that kills the tank for good. You don't remember much after that. A blur. A flash. A moment of falling. Maybe crawling. You wake up behind a snowbank. Or in a trench. Or in a pile of wreckage that used to be your machine. If you're lucky, the medics get to you. If not, you become part of the wreckage. Another shape, frozen in place. Half buried in soot and ice. Getting hit in a Tiger doesn't mean instant death. Not always. But it's never clean. Never painless. Never quiet. And if you're not dead yet, you're just waiting for the next round. There's a hatch above you, sure. There's another near the driver. There's technically an escape route under the floor too. On paper, in diagrams, in the training manual nobody actually read. But once the shooting starts, once the flames start licking the floor plates, and the commander's voice drops to that cold, clipped tone, that only means one thing. We're not staying. You realise what every tank crew figures out eventually. There is no good way out of a tiger. Start with the turret hatch. That's the one most people know. The one at the top. The heroic escape route. Just climb up and out. Simple, right? Except the turret's not always in the right position. If it's facing sideways, the hatch might be over the track. Or worse, boxed in by debris or angled terrain. Then there's the gun breech. It's massive. Takes up most of the space. You can't squeeze around it fast. You have to duck under, twist sideways, and climb up a metal ladder with boots that barely fit through the rungs. The hatch itself is heavy. Not just push it open, heavy. It's thick steel. You have to unlatch it, shove it up, then hold it there with your back or your shoulder while you climb. If it's iced over, you're scraping with your knife. If the tank's tilted, gravity's working against you. And if the turret ring is jammed from damage, the hatch might not even open fully. Meanwhile, the tank is still taking fire. The loader's trying to climb past you. Or maybe he's already out. Maybe he didn't make it. You don't have time to check. The smoke is blinding now. The fire is under the floor grates. The heat's coming up through your boots. And you're still not at the hatch. Now imagine you're the driver. You're even worse off. Your hatch is in the front left of the hull. You sit behind a heavy steel plate, surrounded by control rods, cables, and the engine bulkhead behind you. If a shell hits near the front, the hatch might deform, jam, or just refuse to open from the inside. You kick it. You slam your shoulder into it. It doesn't move. That's not a stuck door. That's your coffin. There's a pistol port near your seat. Supposedly you can shoot out of it. In reality, it's too small to matter. And no, it doesn't open wide enough for a person. You try anyway, because that's where your brain goes in the last few seconds. Every bolt, every seam, every crack in the armour becomes an imaginary exit. Some tanks have a belly hatch, emergency use only, but try reaching it in full gear when the turret basket is jammed, the loader's unconscious, and the ammo racks are burning. It's under the floor grating. You have to pull it up. There's usually something heavy sitting on it, like you, or another crewmate, or the fire you were trying to get away from. And even if you get out, let's pretend you're not safe. You're exposed. You're crawling out of the top of a tank like a rat escaping a sinking ship. And you're doing it under fire. Enemy rifles are already watching for movement. Machine gunners see your silhouette before your boot even clears the hatch. Snipers track that little black square in the turret roof like it's a shooting gallery. The second your helmet clears the edge, someone's pulling the trigger. So you move fast, or you try to. You don't climb gracefully. You throw yourself out. You fall hard. Land on your shoulder, your ribs, your face. Doesn't matter. You scramble. You slide in the mud. You grab for your pistol, or your helmet, or anything you can use to look less like a target. And the tank's still there. Still smoking. Still drawing attention. The thing that kept you alive is now the thing that's getting you killed. Escape isn't a plan. It's a gamble. The crew doesn't all get out. Sometimes two make it. Sometimes one. Sometimes none. There's no pattern. No justice. The guy closest to the hatch might freeze. The one furthest away might fly out like a ghost. You don't think about it. You just move. No one practices evacuation. Not really. In training, maybe you did it once. Hatch drill. Climb in, climb out, time it. But nobody said what it would be like with smoke choking the air, fire curling under the turret ring, and a fellow crewman slumped against the only exit. And if you're wounded, forget it. There's no room for heroics. You try to drag someone, and suddenly the turret's too small, the steps are too steep, and your hands are shaking. Maybe you do it anyway. Maybe you haul someone out by their belt while praying the next shell misses, but you don't know what happens next. Because if you get hit again while trying to escape, they won't find enough of either of you to tell who was the hero. So when they say abandon tank, you don't nod. You don't answer. You just move and hope the latch turns and the hatch opens and the fall doesn't break your leg and the gunfire doesn't catch your back and the flames don't follow you out. Escape is possible, just not for everyone. It doesn't always take a direct hit to end a tank's life. Sometimes it just gives up. Not in a dramatic fireball, not in a heroic blaze of glory, but with a cough, a whine, a jolt, and silence. One moment you're rolling forward, engine humming, treads biting into frozen mud. The next, you're still. Lights dim, gauges flat, power gone, and you're in the worst possible place. No man's land. Maybe it's a transmission failure. Maybe the engine overheated. Maybe the fuel line froze solid again, or snapped or cracked. Maybe the track threw itself off the drive sprocket like it's had enough of the war too. You don't even know yet. All you know is that the tank isn't moving, and you can't fix anything until you get out, which means you're about to open a hatch. Again, no man's land is called that for a reason. It's not a place, it's a sentence. It's the frozen waste between your line and theirs, littered with craters, bones, wire, and bodies, most of them still in their winter uniforms. There's no cover, no safety, just churned earth and ghosts. And now you're sitting in the middle of it. 54 tons of attention-grabbing, shell magnet steel, parked neatly like a target at a rifle range. You can't move, you can't turn, you can't hide. You're just there, glowing hot on every enemy's map, and colder by the second on the inside. First instinct? Try the engine again. Maybe it's just a sputter, a hiccup. You toggle the switches, pump the throttle. The driver curses under his breath. Nothing. Dead. The gauges aren't even pretending anymore. Second instinct, radio command, request recovery. Except the radio's down, or the batteries are, or the antenna was shot off 3 hours ago and no one noticed, or the rear units are already moving back, retreating, leaving you right where you are. No one's coming, so you pop the hatch, just enough to breathe. Cold air rushes in like punishment. You scan the terrain. Nothing moves. Yet. That's always worse than seeing something. When it's quiet out there, it means they're watching, waiting, listening. You assess the problem, climb out, drop into the snow. The crunch is too loud. The smoke from the exhaust is too visible. The heat shimmer from the engine deck still hangs in the air like a beacon. You circle the tank. Try not to slip. Try not to fall into one of the shell holes. Try not to think about the fact that every moment you're out here is a second someone else has to line up a shot. You find the problem, a snapped drive wheel, or a shattered torsion bar, or a dislodged track link. Maybe part of the suspension twisted when you hit that crater. Whatever it is, it's not fixable with bare hands and a bad attitude, and this is where reality sets in. You're not getting this thing out on your own. You joke about it all the time. Just push it. But nobody's laughing now. The Tiger weighs over 50 tons. That's not an exaggeration. It's not metaphorical. That's the real number. More than a dozen elephants. And your crew is 5 men. 2 of whom can barely lift a crate of ammo without grunting. Still, you try, because you don't want to be stuck. Because no one wants to explain to command why their precious tiger is sitting exposed in open ground. So you dig. You jam wood under the tracks. You try to re-link the broken tread with frozen fingers. You curse. You sweat. You slip. You fall. The wind picks up. The snow starts again. Visibility drops. Now you're wet, freezing, and are still stranded. You think about setting up a perimeter, but you've got 2 rifles and a sidearm between you. The tank was your gun. Without it, you're just 5 guys in grey coats standing around a giant dead box. Then the shelling starts, not aimed, not yet. Just probing shots, distant thumps, whistles overhead. A blast goes off 100 metres to your left. You flinch, another one closer. You don't even look to see where it hit. You know what's happening. They've seen you. They've figured it out. They're ranging in. You dive back into the tank. The loader slams the hatch. The commander yells. The driver pumps the dead controls like they'll suddenly come alive. The gunner wipes frost off the optics, even though the turret won't rotate properly anymore. The next shell hits the ground behind you. Dirt sprays across the hull. You feel it inside, tiny vibrations that make your spine tighten. Someone screams outside. Not your crew, somewhere nearby. Maybe another unit, maybe no one. There's a chance, a slim one, that another tiger might come to tow you. But they'll have to reach you first. And that means exposing themselves to the same fire. Most won't risk it. Not for one dead tank. Not for a crew that might already be gone. So you talk options. Strip the tank? Maybe. Remove anything useful. Radios, optics, ammo, then destroy it. If you have explosives, if they're dry, if you remember where they're stored, try to dig a path. Pointless. It's not stuck. It's broken. Wait for nightfall? Might as well. You're not going anywhere until then. Maybe under cover of darkness you can slip away. Walk back. Hope you don't run into Soviet patrols. Hope you don't freeze. Or maybe stay. Use the tank as shelter. Try to hold until help comes. If it comes. Inside, the air gets colder. The heat from the engine is gone now. The metal starts to feel like ice against your skin again. You rub your hands together. Open a ration tin. It's frozen solid. You laugh. The loader laughs too. Then stops. You all sit there. Quiet. Listening. Another shell lands. Farther away this time. Maybe they think you're already dead. Maybe they're right. You don't notice it right away, the mental part. It creeps in slowly, under the engine noise, under the shouting, under the fumes. One day you forget what week it is. The next, you don't know what time it is. Morning, evening, midday, doesn't matter. After that, you stop caring entirely. That's how it begins. Out here, sleep isn't rest. It's just unconsciousness between panic. You don't lie down, you slump. Against the turret ring. Against a box of ammo. Against the back of the gunner's seat, if you're lucky. You close your eyes, and your body gives up for an hour. Maybe less. Then something jolts you awake. An engine backfire. A shell landing somewhere too close. Or just the silence that's too quiet to trust. You're always exhausted, but not in the usual way. Not in the way that says, I need a nap. This is a deeper kind. The kind that feels permanent. Bone deep. Like your cells are tired. Like your thoughts are heavy and hard to hold up. You forget words mid-sentence. You blank on names. You stare at the same dial for 2 minutes, trying to remember why you were looking at it. You start to lose track of who you were before the tank. Back then, you had a name. A city. maybe even a girlfriend or a favourite food. That all gets flattened into the background. Now you are your position. Driver, loader, gunner, commander. That's it. That's who you are now. Anything else is just distant noise. You stop reacting to things the way normal people should. You see bodies in the snow and don't blink. You smell burning flesh, your own crew sometimes, and don't flinch. You watch another tank get hit, the turret blown clean off, and you just look away. Not in horror, in routine, like changing the channel. You're filthy. Not just dirty, filthy. You haven't bathed in weeks. There's no water for that. You've worn the same wool uniform through snow, rain, blood, and oil. Your skin itches constantly. Your hands are stained with grease and soot, and whatever came out of the last exploded shell casing you had to reload. You wipe your face and forget how long it's been since you last washed it. You smell terrible. Everyone does. Nobody says anything. You talk less. Everyone does. Conversations are clipped, practical, mechanical. Load. Stop. Enemy left. Shells left. Tree. That's about it. Nobody wants to waste breath on anything more. And when you do talk, it's usually about the tank. Or food. Or both. Jokes still happen. That's the strange part. You'll hear someone mutter something dark and stupid and funny, and for a second, everyone laughs. Not because it's actually funny, because it cuts through the weight hanging in the air. But the laugh never lasts. It dies fast, and the silence feels even heavier afterward. You start hearing things. Phantom sounds. A shell that never landed. A track squealing in the distance that no one else hears. You swear someone called your name. You turn your head and see nothing. You hear the engine running when it's off. You feel the tank moving when it's still. You see things too. Shapes out in the snow that don't move. Faces through the periscope that vanish. Someone standing beside the tank in your peripheral vision. But when you look, it's just frost on the viewport. Dreams aren't any better. You dream about being stuck, trapped under the tank, burned alive, abandoned. Or sometimes you dream about nothing at all, just darkness and the humming of the engine that never stops. That might be worse. You develop habits, little routines, rituals. You always touch the turret gear before a mission. Always check the same bolt. Always arrange your kit the exact same way. Not because it matters, but because it gives the illusion that you're still in control of something. Your body starts breaking down too. The cold gets into your joints. You walk like an old man, even though you're 20. Your knees hurt from the way you sit. Your back aches. Your hands are cracked. You get infections in your gums. Your vision blurs when you stand up too fast. When there's downtime, you don't relax. You just sit, blank, your hands idle, your brain off. Some guys write letters. You used to. Then you stopped. You don't know what to say. Still alive. Still cold. Still in the tank. That's all you've got. And you don't know if anyone's reading them anyway. You stop imagining the end of the war. That was months ago. Now all you picture is the next day, maybe the next hour. Can we get through this next shelling? Will the engine start tomorrow? Will the ammo last until dusk? That's as far as your mind allows itself to go. Someone in the crew snaps, quietly. You notice he's not loading shells quite as fast. He stares too long at the wall. His eyes are red. He mumbles to himself when he thinks no one hears. The commander doesn't say anything. There's nothing to say. You all notice. You just pretend you don't, because you might be next. You're always bracing for something. Not an attack, just something. A breakdown. A fire. A scream on the radio. a cloud on the horizon. Any excuse for your body to flood itself with adrenaline again, even though there's nothing left to flood. You don't feel fear the same way anymore. It's dulled. Not gone. Just quiet. A background hum. You don't panic when the shells hit. You just wait. If it's your time, it's your time. That's how it works now. That's how you survive. You stop trying to not die. You just keep going. Until something makes you stop. Some days that's enough. Some days it's not. It doesn't come with a big speech. Nobody gathers around. Nobody salutes. There's no music, no flag, no fade to black. The end of a tiger crew comes like everything else on the Eastern Front. Abruptly, without fanfare, and usually with nobody left to tell the story. Sometimes it's fire. The hit is perfect. Ammo rack, engine block, fuel cell, take your pick. The explosion is inside, not outside. That's how it goes. 1 second you're inside a machine. The next, the machine is inside you. In your lungs, under your skin, wrapped around your neck like heat and iron. The turret lifts. The hatches blow open. You don't see it from the outside, obviously, but they do. The crew in the other tank. The infantry up ahead. The ones behind you on the radio. They hear the pop, look over, and see the fireball. A pillar of black smoke rising out of the woods or the field or the town square. They say Tiger's gone. And that's it. If you're lucky, you didn't feel it. If you're not, you did. At least the beginning. The heat, the pressure, the half second of confusion before your nerves stop transmitting and everything fades to smoke. Sometimes it's ice. The tank doesn't burn. It doesn't explode. It just stops. Maybe the engine dies in the cold and never wakes up again. Maybe the last shell has been fired and the crew is out of food, out of fuel, out of orders. No one comes, so you sit. You sit in a machine that once ruled the battlefield, slowly becoming a steel tomb frozen into the earth. Snow piles up on the hull. The wind howls through the periscopes. The radio is silent. The silent stretches. Days pass. Or maybe just hours that feel like days. You huddle in your coats, shaking, quiet. Maybe someone goes out to scout. Maybe they never come back. Eventually the tank is alone. Eventually so are you. Sometimes it's abandonment. Not heroic, not desperate, just bureaucratic. A shift in command. A retreat. A road too narrow. A bridge too weak. A commander too busy to send a tow. You get the order. Leave the tank. That's all. No explanation. No sentiment. Just those 3 words. You're told to plant charges in the engine block. Smash the optics. Destroy the codes. And walk. So you do. You take one last look at the thing that kept you alive and nearly killed you. For weeks, months, maybe longer. Then you turn your back on it and start walking west. 1 foot after the other. Through snow, or mud, or ash. Sometimes it's not even your tank. You're reassigned. The original crew is gone. Replacements. You climb into a machine that still smells like the last men who used it. Blood in the seams. Burn marks on the ceiling. A patch welded into the floor where something exploded. You sit where someone else died. You load the same gun. You pretend it's fine. Until it's not. No one tracks the tigers like they used to. In the beginning, they had names, numbers, glory. Toward the end, they're just wrecks along the side of the road, twisted hulls rusting in forests, burned out skeletons with open hatches and no crew to shut them again. They become landmarks. Turn left at the tiger wreck. Dig in past the old tank shell. They're not feared anymore, just reminders. Monuments to a machine that was too heavy, too thirsty, too late, and to the men who thought they'd survive it. Maybe someone finds your tank in the spring. The snow melts. The bodies inside are still strapped in. Bones in blackened wool. Hands frozen in mid-reach. Maybe they dig you out. Maybe not. Maybe they use the shell for target practice. Maybe they strip it for parts. Maybe someone climbs in, sits in your seat, and wonders what it was like. They won't know. Because the truth is, you didn't last. Not because you weren't brave, or skilled, or lucky, but because out here, none of that matters. Out here, the tiger doesn't save you. It traps you. It carries you forward until it dies. Then it waits. You wanted steel. You got a coffin. And the only real choice you ever had was whether you kept the hatch shut when it burned. So next time you see a photo of a tiger tank, half buried in snow or rusting in a field somewhere, just remember, it wasn't invincible. It wasn't a monster. It was a steel box full of exhausted, freezing, half-starved men, waiting to die in a place no one wanted to be, fighting a war no one could win, inside a machine that was supposed to make them gods, but made them ghosts instead. Sleep well.